Hello everyone, I'm hoping this is now working. I'm hoping this is live. And I'm hoping you can hear me. There is a possibility that we are going to be joined by another voice. Hello everyone, I'm hoping this is now working. I'm hoping this is live. And I'm hoping you can hear me. Well, that's not one, so where am I talking me from? I'm currently There is a possibility that we are going to be joined by another voice. Hello everyone, There you go, I've managed to get rid of that. Sorry about that. I had so many tabs open to try and make sure to see if the bot was working that I got caught out by one. Everything should be okay. Yes, we are live, and there is sound, and the Discord is open for questions. I think currently the bot is not working.
And of course you have a surprise fleet out of nowhere.
I have a fleet as well here who's very nicely joined us, and I'm hoping you're all being able to hear him.
I shall go and check myself, actually. 1 second.
You should be able to.
I will go check myself. I shall do this. Well, you can't hear me. Well, they can hear me through the speakers, but not through Discord itself. So, that's weird. Oh wait, Dr. Clarke, your headphones aren't in.
That's what I was just sorting out. Give me a second. He says. Sorting this out. No, I don't want to be in here. I need to be down here. So.
Oh well, I've been brought back.
Sorry, just sorting it out. And making sure that the sounds are working properly, he says. And that's why. No, default input device. But output device has disappeared off. Now you should be working properly.
Well, let's have a crack and see. I'll just say something and then I'll wait for myself to appear.
I can hear you now. And I'm hoping everyone else can hear you. So if you carry on talking, let's see if the audio output is registering.
That's what I'm just waiting for.
Yeah, it's done an update, so it is now pushing everyone out massively loud. So
there we are.
Yeah, I've sorted that out.
Excellent. All right, we're good. We're good. See, if I wasn't here, you wouldn't have realised that. I'm useful.
Yes, well, Fu joined us because we were setting the stuff up, and Fu basically went, I like the sound of this bot. I want to be part of this and want to learn this one. And it's got to the point where everything sitting there should work on paper, and Runon has done an absolutely amazing job. It's just not working at the moment. In the classic rule of Murphy's, it's decided not to work.
See, the funny thing is...
Runon's here.
It is working on Twitch's chat. I just don't know why it's not working for YouTube. And it's doing the classic IT programming thing of, it works on my machine, which is absolutely useless because my machine doesn't have logins. So
yeah, this is.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to find the differences. I'm working in the background. Dr. Clarke, up to you. I can give a briefing on how it's supposed to work, but is not currently working in that manner.
I still think it could be the triggers, because there's a source there is for the Twitch chat, but there's not a source in the triggers for the YouTube chat. And I'm wondering, whilst it should work on paper without that, I'm wondering if it's one of those scenarios where it should work on paper without that, but in reality there has to be belts and braces for it to work.
Yeah, one of those things.
Yeah.
Right, so let me get, where do we take questions from?
The Discord.
Taking it.
Discord server.
Yeah.
Right, so then I suppose we get cracking.
Bruships questions. There are questions here. And they will be put there.
Oh my.
Yes, there are questions. And Knight has lots of questions which are coming on, and I'm sure they will be posted across.
Knight, it's what happens. Yeah, this is kind of the, this is what happens.
For our weekly announcement for this stream, we are going to be sneaker netting questions over. So if you are in YouTube chat and you don't have access to the Discord, at a moderator in chat, and we will transfer your questions over. In the future, once I figure out what the deployment issue is here, you should be able to put in !question, then type out your question, and it will be automatically carried over into the appropriate channel in Discord.
And
I'm working on that. Once we get it figured out, we'll let you know.
And the great thing is, eventually, if I get this to work dual casting on Twitch and Discord, Twitch and YouTube at the same time on a Sunday afternoon, for those people who prefer to watch on Twitch rather than YouTube, it should be able to take questions from both, in theory, and stick them in the same place. So if I miss them, it doesn't matter which chat I'm looking at if I miss them. But that's a long-term one, which is going to probably add grey hair to Paul Runon.
Well, ironically, the way this thing is designed, it can do that right now, if it's working to begin with. But right now, the end goal for this bot system is to put the questions into a queue so that Dr. Clarke can then summon the questions as he is ready to process them. At that point, it will dump them into the server with a timestamp so that if somebody has to walk away for whatever reason, go AFK, and misses their question being answered, they can find it in the appropriate channel with the timestamp and go directly to where it was answered. That's the hope. If anybody watches Pirate Software, it will be hopefully similar to his TTSQ. That is the aspirational goal. Do not ask me for a timeline. I have ADHD and very many plates in the air, so
that's fine.
That's a moving target.
All I will say is that there are a large number of various ship-shape members who are looking over my shoulder at this going, once it's working, they are probably going to be paying you in food or in other means.
I'll be out of a job.
No. You, for the sheer quantity that Drac gets, you will not be out of a job. You'll just be having the whole porting section dealt with for you.
Maybe. We'll see. The question is whether or not Drac even adopts it.
That's another matter which I will not get into. My friend is a very, very good, very great historian who, for an engineer who loves inventing old historical systems, has a surprising, interesting approach to some of the more modern engineering systems. But we'll see that. So.
Okay, so I suppose we get started. Do you want to take the first question?
Well,
or can I read it out?
It's how the fluffy research assistants handling the move is the first question, and honestly, not well. Honestly, not well. They want it to be over. I'll put this as an honest thing here. Okay, we were supposed to be moving house. As you all know, originally the plan was I was supposed to be moving in, going down. We were supposed to buy the house in January. I was supposed to be down there, getting the building work done. For about having 3 months to get the building work done. We had builders, everything lined up to come in February, and they would have worked through March and April. I would have not had my birthday with family or anything like that, and I would have got everything set up down there. Then my mum and sister would have moved down. I'd have got them set up, come back, got this house ready. This house would have gone on the market at the beginning of June, and roughly 2 weeks into June, I was going to go away to Scandinavia, and by the time I came back from Scandinavia, the hope was the house would be sold. Because
that's not happening, sadly.
The market in Epsom and Ewell is actually pretty darn quick once you're dealing with family-sized houses. Once you're a 3-4 bedroom sized house in Epsom and Ewell in this area, the houses go within, like, as a rule. Especially if you get them on the market in the summer. Sadly enough, that hasn't happened. However, we do now have a moving date. It's roughly it's the first full week of August. So at some point in the first full week of August, I'll be moving house. I will still be attempting to do the Thursday and the Sunday lives as normal whilst moving. I will have hopefully recorded all the recorded videos before we go. And all I will ask for is a little bit of leeway and please understand if I am slightly late sometimes with the lives. But everything will hopefully be recorded before I go. But that does mean for the next couple of weeks at least, or next 3 to 4 weeks, 3 or so weeks, I'll be recording from here. So my last my last can of 1901 Iron Brew to drink in my brew shack is still ready, unopened, and ready to be going to be drunk at some point in the future. But yes,
I hope to be here for that, because that will be a grand event.
It will be a grand one. And the Fluffy Research Assistants, their main complaint is they were supposed to be by the seaside now, having ice creams by the sea for their walkies every week. They were not supposed to be still walking around what they consider an urban jungle. And by the way, if anyone wants to Google Maps Epsom and Ewell, and if you look at the part where I live, which is not too far from the Downs, i.e. where the racecourse is, if you think that's an urban jungle, then you and I have problems. But according to my dogs, it's an urban jungle. There are too many houses. They want beachy, fluffy, cliffy coastline and ice creams. Because down there, there is actually an ice cream company which produces dog-friendly ice creams that they can have pretty much as they like. Pretty much as many and as much as they like. It's just, in the nicest way, the thing is, a vet retired down there, and she worked with the local ice cream company that produces ice creams and has produced a variant which is dog-friendly, dog-happy, and dogs love it, including my 2 addicts. Who literally, if I have a tub of that, I swear would do anything to get to me to have it. It's fun times. Anyway, if a class of 4 CVO-1 carriers are built, do you think that the Tornado would have been adapted for carriers? I'm not sure if the Tornado... The Tornado I don't think the Tornado would have been adapted for carriers, but it might well have been built with the idea of being on carriers in mind. There's a difference between adaptation and building it for. You see, if you already know you're going to have carriers of that size, capable of taking it, then it's within your interest to build from the get-go an airframe which can be adapted to a carrier airframe. You can build an airframe so that it's, how do I put this? It's designed in such a way you can add in bits to strengthen up that airframe and make it into a carrier landing airframe, and there are bits you don't need to have for it to operate. But as the Tornado airframe is built, to turn it into a carrier aircraft, you'd have to completely restart again. In a nice way, it's going to be a new aircraft completely, because the airframe, everything's going to have to be different. So no, my thing is, it won't have been adapted, but it might have been built for. If it's built for, it's okay, but it would never be adapted. And that basically answers 96831's question of, is the Panavia Tornado even suitable for a carrier? Not in its existing form.
You could majorly rework it for one, but it's the thing with we've been discussing this a great deal for basically RN fleet carriers during the Red Fleet timeline, and what the Malta's final air wing is before they're replaced in the 1990s. And there's some debate, but we have said that some form of naval Tornado is likely, alongside Hornet.
But the difference is, you are going to have to start it from the get-go, from the beginning of the program. That component is going to have to be built into the design structuring and the framing, and you're going to have to get all the partners on site. You cannot adapt that airframe.
What I will say is, there's also something working against the Tornado here in being adapted for carriers, in that it's a joint program. And we see what happens to joint programs whenever people want them for carriers. It happened to the French when they had to drop out of Eurofighter and create Raphael. If Tornado is being set up for carriers, maybe if France and Britain are pushing for it, they might be able to. But then you'll just get the Germans dropping out and creating something of their own.
Well, you might do, you might not, because if the Italians are also operating a carrier at that point, then you have 3 of the major buyers.
Well, the Italians are never going to operate a carrier that can carry Tornado.
Are you sure? No, in nicest way, in this scenario, we're talking about, in the Red Fleet's timeline, if I'm not mistaken, the Soviet Union has large aircraft carriers, the British have large aircraft carriers, the French have large aircraft carriers. The Italian, basically, the British the British have nuclear weapons because the French have nuclear weapons, and we need them to deter the French from firing at us because we like that in our fraternal relation and our familial relationship. The Italians are not going to accept into that scenario for a lot of that period having a second-tier navy to the French. They're also going to want a large fleet carrier. They might not operate a lot of them, but they'll have at least one of them. National pride, my dear friend.
Can you imagine
the
Italian Navy would need anything other than the ski jump carriers they historically operated?
But who's going to be operating those? Who's going to be providing them?
Well, the Harrier will still exist.
Yes, but the British won't have a ski jump carrier. They're not going to pay for that as well as the Maltas. You're never going to get that much out of the Treasury. So, nice way, who's going to start that program? The Italians are going to go on their own to start a ski jump Harrier program with carriers? No. Both Spain and Italy will end up with small Catabar carriers of about 35 to 40,000 tons maximum.
Probably built to the same design with interchangeable parts.
Probably in the nicest way, they're going to be modified light fleet carrier designs from the Royal Navy, so design tree. They might even be built by British naval engineering firms.
Problem is, when are they going to stump up the money for these carriers?
That's what Marshall Aid is for.
Don't forget, the Italians have got to maintain 2 Littorios.
Yeah, even more reason for them to have a carrier.
Look, anyway, we're getting sidetracked here.
But there again, you also add in the Spanish, so the Spanish would have a carrier, and they'd also need aircraft, so you could have Spain and Italy joining into the programme, and it would be a joint European one. Alternate to that is, if it doesn't work and no one wants to join in on it, then you might get an Anglo-French-American programme that develops whatever the Hornet is in that timeline.
Possibly, but it probably would still end up being the Hornet, because the Hornet's just awesome.
Potentially, but imagine the French and the British involvement. There'd be bigger, more powerful engines on it. British.
True, from the start.
And let's be honest, the French would take one look at the Hornet and go, she's good, but we can make her beautiful.
Maybe.
Hey, that F-18 is a pretty bird.
Yeah, I was going to say, the F-18, nothing wrong with the F-18.
Oh, no. So...
Right. Next, Blackburn. I'm going to move on from this because I do not want to have another Bruships where I accidentally hijack it. I refuse. Moving on. Blackburn Maximus girl, Cargie Best girl again. Question 3. If capital ship production hadn't been suspended, but it was still held at a limit of 35,000 ton standard, what kind of ships would we have seen come out of Washington before First London? Well, the thing is, we don't see any designs. The only designs we see drawn up are the Nelsons, because we don't see any designs for Washington Treaty capital ships drawn up until First London is being contemplated and the naval holidays ending. We can guesstimate what the US and the Japanese might have come up with.
Oh, you're such a nice soul.
What?
You're such a nice soul.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in the nicest way. You do realise that all these navies have a battleship capital ship design team, who are about 20, 30 naval architects strong, who are kept in the post the entire way through that period. So do you imagine they are sitting there the entire time twiddling their thumbs doing nothing? We've got a person, let's be honest, the head constructor in that team in the UK is on a rear admiral's salary.
All right, then what would they have come up with?
Well, let's be honest, in the nicest way, just carry on working through the letter programs. In the nicest way, their design ideas are not going to change. They're going to have designs for if the treaty breaks down, and they're going to have designs for if we have to build ships.
Well, we know what the British 35,000 ton capital ship will be immediately post-Washington. It's the Nelsons.
No, it's the F3s. The moment they get the Nelsons in, they start complaining about their lack of speed.
So the things following the Nelsons will be the F3s then?
Pretty much. Something along the lines, an improved version. Using the knowledge gained constructing a Nelsons, they're going to be an improved version of that. And it's the same with the Americans. You can basically look at what the Americans are looking at, and to be honest, most of the navies in the 1920s, their ideas are very similar to the British. There is a reason why the Russians' first official capital battleship design that we have examples of is the Nelsonsky. The Nelrodsky. It looks like a Nelrod. Pretty much everyone's does in that period because everyone's basing off the Jutland experience, and no one's thinking, hang on, what the future of war is going to be like. And it's only the British are the ones who are regretting it, and again, it was something pushed into by Beatty, etc., who wanted to refight Jutland, and the whole navy had been after Jutland, had been going, no one's ever going to fight that kind of battle again. No war is ever going to be like that again, because, let's be honest, if you're fighting a global war versus, let's say, Japan or America, and those are the only two major naval powers who are an actual threat to the British, in terms of size and scale that the British are actually going to think about it, are you going to mass your battle fleet for one large, massive battle against their battle fleet? Think about how big the American coast is.
No, of course you're not.
No,
not going to happen.
It's going to be task forces. In which case, the Nelrods don't make any sense because they're too slow. It's only people like Churchill and Beatty who think of them as the unsinkable bulwarks of the battle line and bastions of the battle line that actually think it's a good idea. And I still like the Nelrods. I think they're a fairly decent class, and they do exactly what they're asked for, and they do more than that on regular occasions. But let's be honest. They were the ships for World War I, not the ships for World War II.
Fair enough. What about the Japanese then, and the Americans? What are we looking at?
Well, the Americans are also looking at Nelrodsky.
Nelrodsky? Oh, for God's sake, not again. I've started a ski thing now, and I'm never going to hear the end of it.
And, as for the Japanese... They're honestly
Nagato, but better.
Yeah,
honestly.
pretty much. They're evolving their ships.
Honestly, you're basically looking at the best way to describe it is either is not so much an improved Nagato as it is a Kaga class without the 5th turret and more armor.
The odds are it's actually going to be potentially without the 5th and the 4th turret. Because
triple turrets?
Triple turrets. That's the thing that the Japanese are moving towards. And again, it's because you can cut down weight and displacement and space on the hull, and you still have 9 guns.
Would be
so you think if you've gone from 10-16, you will with 5 twins, you have 10-16s.
To 3 triples with
you have 9. Yeah.
It's just worth it. And honestly, if the Japanese are content to stick to 26 knots. They can, with the improvements in armor layout, they can actually get ships that can resist their own guns.
Yeah.
Like, the Nagatos can at a pinch, but not really.
And as always, as I say regularly, ships can resist their own guns the first hit. The next hit is going to pepper that armor. Because basically armor will stand up to 1 hit in that area. Then you hope you don't get hit at that spot again.
Yeah.
I always love it the way some people treat, especially in movies, armor as being this sort of impenetrable thing that is going to repel all hits. But actually, no, it's cumulative damage. And you hit, the force of that explosion, etc., is going to do serious damage to that armor on a metallurgical level.
It is not going to be able to resist a round that comes in again.
And the next one, if it hits within, let's say, within about a radius of about 2.5 to 3 meters of that spot,
it's going through.
It's going to go through. It might not manage to go as deep as it would expect, as it would with no armor, but it's still going through. Now, Henk, from what information sources, I have the German-English, don't quite agree about. I hear the German agreement about the first of the Panzerschiffe to Deutschland. The German sources say it was laid down in the same way as battleships Bern, Hauswerk, and Kiel. The English sources say Deutschwerk Kiel. Photo and video seems to agree with the German sources, but I understand the contract was awarded to Deutschwerk, and Hauswerk was a subsidiary of Deutschwerk at the time. Could you please clarify, Dr. Locke? My understanding and my knowledge of this is that it's basically the great debate of one is a subsidiary of the other, and the British sources and English-speaking sources seem to be concentrated on who was awarded the contract, and the German sources are concentrated on where it was built. As far as the British English are concerned, that the English sources are concerned, that yard belongs to Deutschwerk now, and so it's it's built by them. But the actual yard is the old, I think, Hauerwerk. But that is a massive that is a joyous bit of debate, and that is something which I myself have not put too much research into. I only know the reason I know about that debate at all is because a friend of mine who I was at a conference with about, oh good lord, it was the year before COVID, so that's a long time ago, was ranting about it and was going to have to investigate it. I have never heard back what happened to them after that on terms of their research, because as far as I know, during COVID, their wife became pregnant with twins. They had twins, and the twins have kind of taken over their lives, especially as about last year they had another set of twins. So they've had 2 sets of twins in about a 4-year period. So, yeah, their life is not their own anymore. I don't think they've had time to go and fully research that, but they are planning a book someday about the whole development and engineering structure and yards development of the Germans, and that's one of the reasons why I know as much as I do about the yards, but I'm just remembering that. I think I'm remembering it correctly from the discussion with them. But as said, yes, two sets of twins will take over your life.
Doctor, would you like the good news or the bad news?
Good news?
The bot's working.
Bad news?
I don't know why. I have an idea why, but I don't know why.
May I have a test?
Well, Steve's tested it, Teamu's tested it, and Blackburn's tested it, and they've all carried over. They haven't grabbed the profile pic, but I'm not too worried about that. I'll fix that later.
Woohoo! It's working! I can even roll down to it. It is working.
Yeah. So I can't answer why it's working. I have an idea. I think it's the bot has to be streamed in. Yes, streamed in. It has to be signed in your instance of StreamerBot to the Discord, not the Discord, the Google account for it. Yes, Fleet, that did go through.
It did.
Because that's the only thing that I've changed. I am surprised to see that it's working here. Maybe it just maybe Google finally made the connections in the back end. But regardless, it's working. So you know what? Don't touch it. Just leave it, and we'll see if it works next Sunday.
And I'll make sure I keep turning it on every time. And we'll have it also try and have it working this time.
Question from Peter Dawson. How was the trip?
The trip was fantastic. Scandi ship was a lot of fun.
We actually did discuss this on Ramblings, and I even got Drag to show up, so if you want to have a bit of...
If you want to have a full discussion on Ramblings, yes, we'll get the 2 Dans and we'll get Gareth.
Oh shit, that's right, I need to... Oh, fucking hell, I forgot to... Sorry.
Language, Fleet.
Sorry, I'm just so shocked, but I just realised I forgot to arrange it. Oh, Christ! I forgot to arrange it for tomorrow. No!
Is it tomorrow? Is it tomorrow? Was it next week?
Remember, I have mute authority.
Was it?
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Okay, well, just ping them. They're lovely.
All right, I'll do that now. Who is it? It's Drac. I need to... Drac, and I need the rest of them.
Fleet, I'm just going to quickly do something quietly off screen. Give me a...
Please,
hide this for
could
a
you
second.
get them?
I'm just gonna... There's a simple way to make life a little bit easier. You should have just received an invite, Fleet, to something on Discord.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Clarke. I'm honoured.
That makes life a little bit easier for all of us.
Well,
there we go, back. By the way, unsurprisingly, being who we are, the Shipshape crew do have our own Discord server which looks after us. And all 5 of us are there, so I just invited the food to it. That saved any problems. Right, so Black Maximus. If, when HMS Royal Pindy starts to battle against Sharnos and Gneisenau, a squadron of 8 British county-class cruisers and accompanying tribal-class destroyers appeared from the opposite direction of battleships, what could happen? Well, Sharnos and Gneisenau would cease to exist. You've got 8 counties and 8 tribal-class destroyers appearing. That's a lot of firepower turning up. A lot of torpedoes. And
the Scharnhorst have to run. They have to run.
They can't outrun those. 8 counties and 8 tribal class.
They've got to try.
They're going to have to try, but those are they're coming from the opposite direction. They are between them and home, so their only escape route is to charge out into the North Atlantic. So their options are to fight their way through or charge their way out into the North Atlantic, being pursued. And remember, the counties will have some of them will have aircraft on them. That's not good. Basically, it's a very painful battle. And yes, the British will probably lose at least 3 of the counties, probably. And probably 4 or 5 of the tribals. But would the RM be happy to exchange that for both Scharnhorst? Well, not happy, because they wouldn't want to lose that many people, or that many ships. But would they accept the loss as being worth it? Yes. And let's be honest, if both Scharnhorst get sunk in such a way, what does Hitler do to the rest of his fleet?
The Führer's going to lose his marbles, let alone his mind.
Yeah.
He had marbles?
Some believe he did. Now, Rudon, you ported this for yourself. As question 205, as USS Halford proved why the Royal Navy was correct to not put aircraft catapults on everything below an Emerald cruiser. Why were the Emeralds the smallest? Why was the Emeralds the smallest the arm would go? It didn't so much prove it as showed that frankly it didn't work that well. I would say with this scenario, the Emeralds were the smallest the RM would go, but also the Emeralds were the smallest they really sort of built. The Ara Fusers had something, I seem to remember. Give me a second. I always love it the way that my system now auto sets up goes, yes. The Ara Fusers had Fairy Sea Foxes, and they displaced 5,520 tons standard load. So that it's actually the Ara Fusers which are the smallest the RN goes down to. But basically, the RN felt a cruiser would have the size to make it worthwhile, and honestly, that's what they kept to. And by the time they're doing the experiments, the Americans are doing experiments. The British are going, why do we need to do that? There are things we can experiment on. They don't want to. There are others still trying it. There are others who are still the Dutch are always trying to put aircraft on the smaller things, and also I think the Iron were also looking at helicopters by that point. Black Maxus, what if the Hawkins class had been about 14,000 tons standard but had 4 triple turrets with 7.5-inch guns? Well, A, the Royal Navy have been far happier with them, and B, you probably end up with standard displacement for cruisers and everything else below set at the Washington Treaty at about 15,000 tons. If it's set at 15,000 tons, then the odds are the battleships go up. The capital ship tonnage goes up to about 40,000 tons, probably about, to give them the size. Because they wanted to have clear deadweight between capital ships and cruisers, so could well go up to 40,000.
I've been waiting for this Hawkins question.
40,000.
Simply put, the Hawkins aren't... Yeah, simply put, well, first things first, the Hawkins aren't the Hawkins. They're designed for an entirely different role.
Well,
you're looking at ships that are stepping more into replacing the role the Invincibles used to have, rather than larger cruisers to comprehensively deal with smaller cruisers. You're looking at foreign station flagships, things like that.
Yeah, definitely, and they're going to be good at it, but also
absolutely, it's more just
they're going to be they're going to be far more capable than they were historically. You might actually put some effort into upgoing to 8-inch guns. If they've got 4 7.5-inch turrets, it's probably going to be easy enough to upgun them to 8-inch guns rather than the single mounts they had in various other systems, because those turrets are going to have mechanisms. And let's be honest, a turret ring for a 7.5-inch turret and a turret ring for a 8-inch turret is not a world of difference between their sizes. In fact, probably the 8-inch turret 7.5 is going to be exactly the same. So that's not going to worry them too much. So pretty much what you end up with mostly is the fact that things like HMS Hermes, etc., are going to be built with complete impunity. Argus is not going to affect treaty naval carrier tonnage, etc. You probably will end up with a whole stream of sub 15,000 ton carriers being built by the various powers. In between Washington and London, and that probably means you will end up with a light fleet carrier or a cruiser, a light carrier or something designation of sub 15,000 tons and a separate limit, because they're just going to be enough of them. They have to, because let's be honest, if the British are able to build a ship up to 15,000 tons, we consider what Hermes is like, and she's just over 10,000 tons, nearly 11. Imagine what they can do with an extra 4,000 tons, and they can build as many of them as they like. They probably keep building a Hermes every single year, along with the cruiser program. They probably the standard program becomes we order 4 to 5 of these new cruisers, and we build them. Plus, also, you're going to have a very different British strategy when it comes to heavy cruisers, because if you can build something of 15,000 tons and 12 8-inch guns, then the difference between that and, let's say, something of 10,000 tons light cruiser with 12 6-inch guns is enough that it becomes worthwhile building, in which case you might have a very different British debate when it comes to the cruisers at London Treaty and the cruiser tonnages. The whole thing changes things a lot. The really interesting thing would be to see what they do about the carrier tonnage. I'd be so tempted to see them do 135,000 tons for both types of carriers, or maybe it'd be 150,000 tons, because if you have, again, because the carrier tonnage could well change in response to, because originally it's set at 30,000 tons, 27,000 tons. In relation to the 10,000 tons, which is an extra 17,000 tons. So they might have increased that to 30,000 tons, which means they might give 150,000 tons of fleet carrier, and they might also do the same for light fleet carriers of 150,000 tons for vessels up to 15,000 tons. And then the Royal Navy could be very happy, and, well, lots of navies could be very happy going into World War II. It's going to change the carrier scenario massively, especially for the larger powers. It's also it's going to change things dramatically for various people. I'm not sure. Ronan, are you questioning? Checking the questions working?
Yeah, I as part of my diag, I started up a stream on my account, which I then closed out, and I wanted to make sure that didn't break it. It does not appear to have broken it, so we can continue going on as normal.
Excellent. That's good. Everything's working. We're hoping it's working. So, question from... yes?
Go on. It's fine. I can wait.
Did you have more you wanted to say on the Hawkins?
No, it was something just... am I alright to ping people in the Scandi ship server, or should I not? Do you want me to leave after I'm done?
No, ping away and don't worry about it. I'm the one who set up the server and does all the admin on that side.
Righto.
We won't mind.
Righto, I've done it.
Dr. Dan appears to have arrived as well now, just to add extra confusion to us. I'm using this as the stand-in screen for the fact that they're here. Next question is Knight 6831, question 204. Would it be right to think the Shetigov PT-1 proposal is the Soviet answer to the Gromov Avenger? Well, it's certainly a Soviet approach to a similar problem. I'm not sure I would ever consider something the Soviet answer to it, because honestly, that would suggest the Soviets were asking that question. And the Soviets often ask many questions, and I ask many questions of the Soviets, but I doubt that is one of them. Anyone else want an opinion on the Shetyov?
From what I can see, it's basically a Soviet analog to a carrier-based torpedo bomber.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's a carrier-based single-engine torpedo bomber from the late 40s. They all follow roughly similar patterns. But I wouldn't say it's an analog to the Avenger.
Okay. So, Timu Lockhart. Timu, you're asking me this question. How big a surprise was finding the only surviving Vickers Armstrong-built submarine from the 1930s in Tallinn? You were standing next to me when I found it. You know how big a surprise it was. You're also standing next to Garius the Brit, a.k.a. Gareth, when he was there. And you saw him, and you saw our faces, and we were like little small children. And then you came with me when I went and mildly bamboozled and happily entranced the staff enough that they let us go up on the bridge. And they have a wonderful bridge, by the way, in the Tallinn Museum. I absolutely love it. It's the old seaplane harbour, the museum in it, and they have a bridge which is as high as the average waves in the Baltic. It's massive. Absolutely massive. And you go up and you go, oh, frigate, this is going to affect things. This is going to affect things, definitely does. And we went up there. It was fun getting up it. I have honestly, after I got the footage, never been more careful in my life getting down something than I was getting down that. I mean, I literally, one last bit of it, I went, okay, I can do my usual trick of walking down practically vertical. But if I fall over and break the cameras and the phone I'm carrying with all the footage, I'm going to be really annoyed with myself. So for the first and possibly the only time on that trip, going down a steep hill, I actually went down on it and slid down on my bum. Because it was the easiest and safest way for the cameras to get down. It would do the most damage to me, the least damage to them. And I didn't notice the pain until I got home that evening. Right, but it was lovely. And it was a massive surprise. And the fact that the Foo here has gone to Finland so often in his life and hasn't been across to Tallinn and hasn't seen it, so didn't tell us before we went. It's something often. I will be holding against him for the rest of his life.
It's that time to Finland is the third time I've been in my entire life.
That's
and it's the first time for a decade and a half.
Two times more than I've been, in terms of as a tourist, and you know you've been there for longer than I was. I was there for a couple of days.
Oh, you can't hold that against. I was there visiting family. There wasn't time.
I'm not the one holding against you mostly.
Who is then?
The one who got on a plane home before going because he didn't realise it was there.
You don't mean Drac, do you? You do mean Drac, damn
it. Right, so what are your thoughts on? And I've not even mentioned Dr. Dan, but I'd be careful about getting medical diagnosis from him. Be careful about
it. Blackburn Maximus. What are your thoughts on?
I don't want. I have labeled all your medical records saying you are allergic to all painkillers.
I would point out that I've not. I would point out that I've not been there myself, so I don't know why you're all getting angry at me. Wait, no. Are you all getting angry at me because I didn't go there when I was there several days before you, and therefore didn't give you all time to alter your plans?
Yes.
Yes.
How was I supposed to go see something I didn't even know existed?
Well, this is the trouble. No one knew it existed. So,
anyway,
on the 12, Canada's announcement of buying 12 conventionally powered ice cable submarines. It will be interesting. I have a feeling they're going to go for the Baltic submarine design, which is a very good submarine. But it's also designed for Baltic Sea and a Baltic ice, not necessarily for what the scenario the Australians, the Canadians are going to find themselves in. when I heard Canada was getting involved, and the reason I keep saying Australia is, I thought in a submarine program, I thought, oh, good, they're being sensible. They've joined AUKUS.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, simply because why not buy into AUKUS? And if you have because it's going to be, the yards are going to be literally just to the south or just to the east of you, so your supporting infrastructure is as closest to right next door as you can practically get.
I would point out this is Canadian procurement. Sensibility doesn't really enter.
Yes,
into
that
is the trouble, and it's, let's be honest, they bought the largest oceanic SSKs they could find which were available, the upholders, when they were looking for them, and they found them not suitable to the task. The Australians went for a program of trying to build it and get it suitable, and they couldn't either because of the distances involved. And the trouble is, once you're dealing with, let's be honest, Australia and Canada are both quite large countries, and if you look for the Canadian bases, etc., and they also want to go under pack ice and all these things, look, I wish them luck. I hope they work out the technology. I hope everything goes. I hope they don't go for AIP, because I don't think that's going to work for what they want to do because of the various criteria. But they might manage to make AIP work. There are variants which they could go down the avenue of, which could make it work. Most of the variants currently being used are not designed for that kind of scenario.
I admire their bravery if they try.
I would say I think they are doing a tremendously courageous decision.
Do I get the feeling that we should start a betting pool as to how long after the first AUKUS boats hit the water and begin trials that Ottawa announces interest in buying into the AUKUS program?
Can I get 20 quid on that being an outcome, please?
I'm not allowed to bet on that.
Fair enough.
I have too many friends in the fleets on both sides of the pond. There may already be there may already be things going around, and I may be going, yeah, this is going to happen.
No.
Look, let's be honest. Don't take this wrong way, but the American fleet possibly has an open betting pool on that.
Because if I remember,
are the Americans going to go back into diesel boats?
No, on the Canadians ending up in nuke boats.
What?
By the most expensive way possible.
Because the Canadians don't have a nuclear-certified port.
No, but they actually have the civilian nuclear industry.
If I remember,
they actually have nuclear power, unlike Australia at the moment.
If I remember the article that I read correctly, I think that they were saying they were expecting first delivery to be like 2030, 2035 or something. And doesn't AUKUS technically beat that out by a year or 3?
Yes, but trouble is, building a nuclear submarine takes a lot longer than building an SSK. So if you decide to switch over,
yeah, it's gonna stretch that out even further. But then again, that wouldn't be from what I understand of it, that's not the first time that Ottawa has made such a choice.
No, it wouldn't be. But I have
it absolutely wouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree, Steve. In the YouTube chat, Steve, you are right.
Seneca Nero asks, what would the Royal Navy in the Napoleonic Wars and the War of 1812 do if they got their hands on a double Razzie? Basically a first rate that got Razzied down to a third rate and then again to a frigate. AKA Victory is the original first rate, but it doesn't replace Victory. It is in addition to Victory. Well, first of all, I'm very glad you've given them this ship out of MacGuffining, rather than taking an actual first rate and razzying it down, because whoever made that decision would have been shot, hung, drawn, then quartered, then shot again, because first rates are incalculably valuable. But now that they've got one, you've basically created the world's most powerful frigate that can and will destroy any other frigate in open combat. Question is, what do they do with it?
The question is, it's not going to be anywhere near the War of 1812.
It's got better things to do, like bullying French frigates literally everywhere.
Yes. That's the thing. That's the main trouble in the War of 1812. The Americans send their very, very best. The British,
Then
unless
whatever's there.
it depends. If you're talking about protecting the Silver Fleet and the silver supplies from South America, those are some very, very good captains and crews. Everything else is what's available. And by the way, the 64s have the first draw on the 64s is not the War of 1812. They're fighting the gunboat war in the Baltic.
I was going to say, would it not be that it would sail into the Baltic and go, oh, hello, I remember this was a problem. Not anymore. Next.
Potentially.
I don't
Dan,
know, visit...
What have you done to your microphone?
Nothing.
Because it's sounding even more crackly than normal.
I don't know, but no idea.
Okay.
No idea at all.
Okay, so, Black Maximus, if you visit Ottawa, Canada, what places would you want to visit? We did visit. We did do Canada. Did we do Ottawa?
We did not.
No, we did not.
Toronto.
We did Toronto.
And
Halifax.
Burlington. And Niagara Falls.
Yes, we did a lot of time in Niagara Falls.
And Buffalo, New York, which I'd previously only known about from the musical Assassins, which is probably a little bit too hot a topic to start singing songs from.
Yes, please don't.
Just a bit.
Yeah, we're managing to avoid that topic so far. Let's carry on. But if you visit Ottawa, there's a fair number of museums, I think, there that I'd like to go and see. And there's an archives, which I would like to check out. Nice to go through one. If pre-World War One, the Royal Australian Navy had 1 battlecruiser, 5 light cruisers, 3 protector cruisers, 3 destroyer leaders, 8 destroyers, 6 torpedo boat destroyers, and 2 submarines, how would you structure this force? I'd first wonder why you've got 3 destroyer leaders for 8 destroyers and 6 torpedo boat destroyers.
That was going to be my question as well, actually.
Because you got, like, 40... And destroyers are torpedo boat destroyers in that period. If that's 6 torpedo boats... Do you mean... Or 6... Anyway, leaving that to one side. Honestly, how would I structure this force? Slot them in with the nearest Royal Navy ships to round out squadrons and actually be using them effectively for things. The light cruisers are probably wandering around the Pacific, making themselves a nuisance for everyone who's annoying them. The protected cruisers are probably likewise. The destroyers and destroyer leaders, torpedo boats and submarines are probably playing defense on the critical ports. And the battle cruiser is probably wandering wherever the Royal Navy needs it to wander, because it's probably covering things kind of like convoys, like the one was. And then question 202. Who worries the most if the British had 1 Australian second-class protected cruiser and 2 Australian, 1 New Zealand third-class protected cruisers in the Pacific?
The one... There's not... It depends when. If it's the early part of the war... the only people to worry is the German East Asia Squadron, rather running across the Pacific, and Emden.
Yeah.
After they're dealt with, there's
no one on there to worry about it, really.
There is a very, 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 very small revival of war east of Suez navally when the Ottomans enter the war and the British basically sweep the Persian Gulf of anything the Ottomans had operating out of their ports in Iraq. But it was like a few gunboats and that was it. But apart from that, that's literally...
If I remember correctly, it was a couple of pre-dreadnoughts which were decided to pursue that with extreme celerity and extreme viciousness.
Yeah, a pair of pre-dreadnoughts just swept into the Persian Gulf, and just the Ottoman fleet there, which was basically just there to gunboat. The Ottoman fleet there was complete overkill to deal with the Persians, because it was a pair of gunboats, and Persia had precisely squat in terms of navy.
Mm-hmm.
But then the RN shows up with a pair of pre-dreadnoughts, and it's like...
Hello! You are targets! We could be ruder about you, but we're not, as people might be listening.
Basically in the Pacific War in World War One is basically over by the end of 1914, and there are no actions in the Pacific at all. No German U-boats show up, nothing happens in the Pacific in World War One post 1914.
Was the bot obtained from Canada's Phoenix Pay system? No, it's a very nice little system. It's StreamerBot, and yeah, we've been. One of the interesting things is I've been playing around with it, but I reinstalled it today from fresh to make sure it's completely clear before Runon has sorted out all sorts of things to try and make it work, and hopefully it's working.
It is open source where, for those of you who are into such things and actually understand how to manipulate that. And there are servers, Discord servers and whatnot, and plenty of videos that will allow you to set up your own gear.
Carrot151, given the reuse of port defences time and again, or their use as foundations for our buildings, examples being Portsmouth and Corunna, do you think we will find more historic port defences partially intact below our buildings in future? Yes. Let's be honest, ports are sort of a fixed thing. A decent bay to go on offloading, they're kind of commonly in use. It's kind of like when we talk about London and the Thames, and people go, well, why is London where it is? And it's because it's where you could cross the Thames. And at crossing points, people usually camp the night because they arrive late anyway, and they want, so someone sets up some houses there because there's trade always going through, and it's good for your farmland and gives you access to merchants. And if you control a ford, you can start charging some taxes and contributions for people crossing and safety, and eventually a town grows up, and then first a village, then a town, then a city. And then the Romans come along and go, yeah, we will turn this into Londinium. The vast majority of Rome's great settlements are built on places which were already settlements. And there's a reason for that. The facts of what makes a good location do not change. Knight 6831, question 201. Would the USN be worried if the Canadians got one Diadem class and one Apollo class Predator cruiser from the British in the 19th century? No. The only people who knew almost as well as the British did how badly the Canadians maintained their ships was the Americans, who saw them as often as the Royal Navy did. The US politicians would be worried because they'd be looking at it on paper. The US Navy would be going, why? Unless they thought it would get them more money, in which case they'd be going, yes, we are terribly worried about this. Please, fund us so we can have some cruisers to deal with this unparalleled threat. Please. Feel free, anyone, to drop in if you have any other points you want to make, But that's basically it.
Hillman just going from the sidelines like, yes, the Canadians, great threat. We must build more cruisers. No, this is before Tillman, but we'll fudge the lines a little bit.
Yeah. Black Maximus, when will the announce of the winner of the Old History short story competition? It hasn't been announced. I was planning to announce it once I'd moved. And sorting everything out once I moved. Because once I've moved, I can unpack and make sure I have all the prizes ready to go. And I can have everything sent off. So that's what's delaying a moment. The fact that I packed these things all the way because we were supposed to be moving shortly. And I was going to send them out once I moved. And then the moving has kept being delayed and the things are sitting in boxes. So it's been delayed till I can send the prizes out. Which means probably it's going to be September time. Why has a chat channel appeared?
That's technically me. You can just ignore it. Oh, shoot. Let me...
Don't worry. I'll sort it out. I will sort it out. I'm not sure why it suddenly decided to activate.
Yeah, it's because Discord. That's how Discord does it. I forgot about that.
Discord likes to be fun. And... When will the next short story competition meet? There'll be another competition over Christmas. And then basically my plan is to run competitions twice a year. Next on will be more of a... Basically, there's going to be one story one a year and one essay one a year, which is basically... I want you to do X, Y, or Z, and I want you to lay it out in an essay, your argument for why it is. So basically, I'm going to do one as a sort of free-flowing you can write a story around this, and one as an essay one. Because I realise some people have that more difficult, but let's be honest, essay ones are also more what I deal with work, so those probably just be assessed by me, which is fun. Dan's now running.
Hello, folks. I'm back.
Thank you. If the British built one Diadem and one Apollo-class protector cruiser for the Canadians, two Polaris-class and one Challenger-class protector cruiser for the Australians, and one Pearl-class protector cruiser for New Zealand, wouldn't allowing the RCN Royal Navy and Royal New Zealand Navy to be formed earlier, and would that allow the RCN, RN, and RZN to be formed earlier? And how does that affect their performance of Order 1?
I don't think it meaningfully does, in all honesty.
It doesn't.
They may be formed earlier, but it doesn't meaningfully change anything, genuinely.
No, it's not going to change.
Really
those are not great vessels to be formed around. Michael 66.
I'm also going to point out there's not many of them.
No. Michael 66. Any news on when the Ship Shape Australia Royals post or when the Trafalgar game gets played? Basically that's all with Garrus. Leave it all to Garrus. That's all the Garrus' organisation and Garrus Battlebox. It is going to be done soon. There's all sorts of things planned, and the Scandi ship. High 4 game there is also our very own Defoe pushing it forward as well. So we'll let the
yes, I'm working on that. Leave that with me.
Yeah, that's going to happen. Hopefully not too soon. So hopefully I can get many practice sessions in, some of which will be Twitch streamed, like they were Saturday night.
Dr. Clarke to embrace the mod I will be demanding we use. Like, I'm not budging on this because I saw how he managed his navy, and I'm not having it. It demeans him as a naval historian. I won't have it. You will iterate on your ship designs, Dr. Clarke. I will not let you slip into the Hoi 4 naval meta. I can't lose someone else to it.
Honestly, all I did in my shit in the nicest way in those things while I was getting used to them was I was learning how to do the fleet commands and organize that. So I just put the ships on build and just had them coming through. I wasn't bothering what they were coming through. I was just learning how to play the game at the moment. I'm still at the my army isn't doing what I wanted to do stage, let alone getting my navies to do what I want to do stage of Hoi 4 learning.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you're ever willing to do a practice run, and I'm online, just drop me a message. I'm more than happy to jump in.
Yeah.
And also, I have all the DLCs, so I can host it.
Oh, Leslie, thanks for suggesting that. You think that we should be doing a Yonai story for this year's a Yonai piece of history about Yonai for the Christmas video, a Christmas topic. I could write a nice one about Yonai, and it would be nice to do something Japanese themed because next year is, of course, the supposed to be the Japan trip. Henk, from what I could find, the Deutschland-class guns and the Scharnos class fired the same shell, but the Scharnos had a longer propellant charge and should then lead to Deutschland's reloading faster, but in fact, per gun, the Scharnos had a higher rate of fire. What technological medical changes enable this? Honestly, it's breach design, but also it's shell hoist design. And it's the fact that basically they've been iterating on the same gun. So the Scharnhorst are sort of the last versions of those guns, and they are the best variants of them. Now, Blackmark says, what model train scales do you have? N gauge and HO. HO/OO gauge.
Dr. Clarke?
Yes?
Would you be interested in acquiring more HO and N scale stock?
My N-gauge railway is pretty much focused on the Great Western Railway.
I do have some Great Western stock I don't need.
I will talk to you about that another time. When I've moved, okay? When I've moved.
Good.
Because I am planning on building a whole new railway when I've moved.
Nice.
Because I had plans in here. But then we started discussing about moving, and so I never built it, because I wasn't going to spend ages building a railway in here, and then move.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Especially as I was going to have to build around a pillar. And yeah. I have my portable N-gauge railway set up in my bedroom anyway.
Nice.
This is the point. I have as they saw in my some early videos, I used to have the N-gauge railway as my opening video. The opening shots on my recorded videos used to be my N-gauge railway, the trains running around the track.
That's awesome. That's actually awesome.
And once I have the new railway set up, it might be re-recorded again, but this time with a little camera on top of on a little carriage on the train going around, so it's in front of it, so it gets a sort of train view of the track of wandering around for it to start off with. And then people go, "This is a Naval History channel," but it starts off with a steam engine going around the track. Yeah, meta. If it can work for all the Facebook people, it can work for me. Question 12. Has
Dr. Clarke.
Has Drax said anything as a result of missing the Estonian-British submarine? I am not getting into that one because there were discussions, as said, and it was a case of there is a reason why the plan originally was Japan, and then the Crusader Islands of the Mediterranean, and now it's the Japan and the city-state organization from the Baltic. What are they called?
Hanseatic League.
Hanseatic League. And then the Crusaders Islands. It's been changed rather rapidly.
Understandably, given what's been discovered.
Well, Chandlord, assuming your Washington Naval Treaty proposal accepted, with the addition of the Navy being able to procure 22,000-ton cruisers with guns no greater than 12-inch on a 10... wow, that's lovely. 10-10-744, 10RN, 10 USN, 744RN. What general design do you think would the Big Three come up with? 22,000 tons for something which has got 12-inch guns? The RN's going to go for an updated Invincible class design. That's realistically what they're going to go for. They're just going to do that. It's probably going to be 8 12-inch guns in full... Or maybe 9. Probably 9 12-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. But the thing is, at that point, you are going to be... If you've got that as your cruiser, as a super cruiser with 12-inch guns, you're probably going to be faced with an argument over the battleship guns, and the British might win with the 16.5-inch. In which case... The whole 16-inch gun issue you get with the nail rods might not happen, because it'll be the 16.5-inch guns straight from the design tree that they already had working for the G3s.
Makes sense, that.
Can I suggest the wall-mountable cabinets of rolling stock that New Junction has? Tempting, but you also have to remember a lot of my wall space is taken up by books. So I tend to prefer adapted bookshelves, because it keeps it more continuous within the space, and also allows me to install the trains sort of at an angle. So that instead of being flat against the wall, they're at an angle, which means they take up less wall space versus the books. So they're more efficient for each of them. Now, I'll put that one. Sheradine, given Tornado is 1 huge and 2 poor in high altitude air defense role, would Jaguar Phantom be a better option? Honestly, anything's a better option.
Navalization.
Yeah, the Phantom was already a carrier aircraft, so the Phantom would probably be actually more likely to be in service, and might have just been in service longer. Honestly, that would probably be a far cheaper option.
And in regards to the Red Fleet part of that question, which it's related to, I can reveal in spoilers, and, well, since you guys are Dr. Clarke's gang, you get the spoilers first. The Ramblings blokes have to wait. The RAF, the French Fleet Air Arm, and the US all adopt the Legacy Hornet and then Super Hornet as their main fleet air defense fighter in the late 80s, early 90s. Phantom serves through the Falklands War and then bows out in the late 80s when Legacy Hornet comes online.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. Hank, if an allied country managed to convince the USA to sell them the hull of the Kentucky in 1958, keeping in mind its bow and engines will move, what choice would we make to equip the ship if appointed to do so?
It depends which allied country buys it.
I'm going to simplify your life, and I'm going to say, in the nicest way, there's 2 options of countries which can actually buy it and sustain it. That's France and Britain.
Britain's not looking for new battleships, so
Yeah, but nice way in this. Sorry, is no countries in this period. So nicest way was saying someone actually is. And either way, I think what you end up with is a mix of missiles and guns. Probably guns forward, missiles aft.
You may end up with a ship carrying auto-loading 8-inch rather than 16-inch guns.
I'm not sure.
As a large heavy surface combatant rather than a battleship per se.
The auto 8-inch guns definitely could be a system they go with. But then they could modify it to have missile launchers, etc.
There's no real argument for the 16s. Like, you'd probably get two triple 8-inch auto-loading forward, and then a bunch of Terrier and God knows what else aft.
Yeah,
the real large missiles.
Something like that. Something massive on a missile scale. Alex on a Nelrod idea. The US will think it's fine 1920s, won't they? They just want slow, heavily armored ships. Yeah, pretty much. That's what they loved at that point. Or rather, 20 second. What do you think is the best use for a double res, as described in my first question? Baltic.
Yep, annihilating everything in the Baltic and being unable to be killed by anything in the Baltic.
Yeah. Blackman Maximus and Kagi Beskell. What if the Courageous class had actually been large light cruisers, 4 9.2-inch armed ships with 6-inch secondaries, 32 knot speed and 7 to 9 inches of armor? They would have been glorious, and they would never have been made into carriers, and they probably would have caused a real problem at Washington Naval Treaty. Because the Royal Navy wouldn't have wanted to get rid of them, so you would have ended up with a super cruiser category.
Yeah,
which would have then affected everything else.
Yeah, it would have either been super cruisers or light battle cruisers. Both terms are infinitely cursed.
They're not battle cruisers. They're not gonna fit in the capital ship category. You can make the claim for battle cruisers because they're gun sizes, and that's what they were using to divide things up. But 9.2-inch guns, you can't. Their size is too big for them to be fitted into a regular escort. You probably end up with the Hawkins class again defining 10,000 tons, and then they'd have an intermediary class which is about. Let's be honest, the Courageous class at that point would be, if they're fitted with 9.2-inch guns, but they've got 3 of them, they'd probably be roughly 20,000 tons in standard. So probably you'd end up with a category of supercruiser to 20,000 tons in standard, and maybe you end up with that 10-10-7 something mix, or not, or something along those lines.
I propose a new term, the Scout Battleship. Or maybe reviving an old term.
Possibly they call them frigates. Possibly at that size they would call them frigates. Which would be interesting. Because if that became the concept of the frigate, goodness knows alive. Right, so yeah, it'd be interesting. How many doggos can the new house and yard contain? 2. 2. We're limiting it to 2 at the moment, okay? There is a debate it might end up being 3. But I've been told I'm not allowed to buy the one I want, so no one else is allowed to. Because apparently I'm not allowed to leave behind a St. Bernard for a month. My mum is worried. My mum is worried it would eat her.
Christ.
Given your answer
about.
Well, I just think it'd be lovely having them walking along together. Imagine it: a St. Bernard, a standard poodle, and a corgi. Imagine that as a trio walking down the street. Doesn't that bring a smile to your face? Carrot151, given your answer about a version of the F3 being a Nelrod, being a Nelrod follow-on, if one of the ships had replaced Rodney in the Bismarck hunt, what speed do you think Hampton would have gotten it to? In the nicest way, if there had been, let's say, if the Royal Navy had been allowed to build 2 Nelrods, and then they'd been allowed to build 2 more ships, they'd have gone with an F3 style design. Might still have tried to work in the 16-inch guns, so it might have ended up being an F2 style design. But it would have been about 28 knots speed, it would have been in terms of official speed, etc. And the thing is, it would probably have turned up a lot earlier than that. You would have had those vessels involved at the Battle of Denmark Straits. Probably, the thing is, also with them in service, alongside Hood, Renown, Repulse, and Tiger, you're far more able to spread out refits and maintain operational capabilities, because you have more ships available. And basically, it changes the whole scenario massively. So it's not going to be a case of hunting the Bismarck. It's going to be a case of the Battle of Denmark Straits. It's going to be that much worse for the odds for the Germans, because again, your basis of your fleet operations, you're not going to have. If you have a standard, let's say the Royal Navy and the Americans are allowed to build 2 ships every 2 years, and that's kept up. And let's say to make life easier, they're allowed 20 ships in each fleet. Well, by 1939, let's say if you do, so take 1920, if you started by 1940, the odds, that's 20 years. You've built 20 ships in that time period. There's probably not going to be a single vessel left in the Royal Navy of the World War I fleet, or maybe not even Hood. So you've got an entirely different navy under that scenario. And you've got an entirely different Battle of Denmark Straits. You've also got a case of when in 1937, etc., they go, oh, we're out of the treaties, we need to pull the build capital ships immediately thing. You have not lost all that infrastructure. You have not ground out any infrastructure because they've had enough ships going through to keep it going. So instead of you having to work up that infrastructure, brrr.
Are you all right, Dr. Clarke?
Yeah, it's just going to change the scenario for the Germans to deal with. Basically, I was doing the rapid factory production line and. Brrr.
Ah, I see.
That's
next then?
That's my rapid factory noise.
Will you go to Sorcon for Blackburn Maximus?
Isn't that a fictional event?
I don't know.
I have no idea. I don't know what Sorcon is. Spain has scored. Oh, good lord. Someone's watching the football.
Oh, God. That's not going to go down well.
I avoid it. I can usually tell what's happened in the UK, in England football matches by what happens in the bridle path as people walk past my house.
Seems likely.
Drakenred, question 1. Royal Navy. When did they start looking into adopting an aircraft like the Mosquito for carriers? Their first testing of twin-engine aircraft and their first inquiries to the Air Ministry about twin-engine aircraft are actually back in 1929.
Of course, there was only one man skilled enough and suicidally brave enough to land a Mosquito on a carrier. You know him. You love him. Eric Winkle Brown. Yes.
Yeah. Question 2. US Navy start looking for aircraft specifically for the Midway class. Oh. They were looking for them specifically for the Midway class. They wanted to have the best aircraft they could get, and they ended up going with a fairly good mix, but some of that was for aircraft already in service. Triggerbation, I hunger, therefore I... What am I doing, Dan Freeman? Yeah.
It's patch. It's what were you expecting?
Yeah. If you look from an industrial capability standpoint, how many Deutschland class or perhaps bigger displacement equivalent Deutschland could Germany lay down at one time during the pre-war years? Okay, when they start building them, probably 2, but you could probably add an extra 1 to be laid down each year. And so they take roughly 2 years to go through construction. So you'd lay down 2 one year, you'd lay down a further next year, you'd then lay down probably 3 the following year after that. Until you get to about 6, you could probably be laying down and constructing simultaneously. If you're happy to cap it at that. It's when you're trying to grow your yards to deal with whatever the H's were going to be. Because remember, the H's are really like the German equivalent of the Yamatos. They're supposed to be able to take on multiple ships at the same time. They're supposed to be so powerful and so great. They can deal with the fact that the Royal Navy is going to build more of them.
Forgive me, the H-class being capable of fighting. Go on.
Yeah, I know. Look, in a nicest way, there are three specific people who, every time I mention the H-class, who turn up in my comments to make their defense. And I end up doing a video, usually in Scuttlebutt, where I respond to their comments. And it goes on and on. So this is why I'm just leaving it at that. Because I don't have the time with moving to give them the proper responses they deserve. Because at least two of them are not wereboos. They are just seem to honestly believe the hype that comes from the wereboo authors. And one of them I'm not sure about. There are times when I think they might have crossed the wereboo line. There are times when I don't think they have. But it's a case of, and my definition for a wereboo is someone who believes no matter what the Germans build, it is going to be the best and ultimately greatest thing ever built. That's my definition. And basically we'll try to... It's like I try and explain when people go, well, their 16-inch guns could be bored out to be 16.5-inch guns. Well, that's going to cause you two problems. One, not every barrel you make of 16-inch guns is going to be able to bore out to 16.5-inch guns because it's going to shatter while you're boring it. Believe it or not, that happens. The Italians will testify to that. They were boring out their 12-inch guns to 12.4-inch, and they managed to shatter them. That's why it was so good. They were going down a turret. And they also lost one of their ships which would have had them, so they had a lot of extra spare barrels around they weren't using. Which is why it became viable. But that's a real problem, and let's be honest, the Italians had, by the time we're talking about when they're doing it, far more experience mucking around with guns than the Germans did by the time they were talking about them doing the 16-inch guns. Because all the people who'd been doing it, you've not been doing it for roughly 20 years. You've lost all that institutional memory. You are trying to do it from reports and by experimentation. So it doesn't matter how good you are. This is like, this is what I find funny. It's imagine if you were trying to learn to drive a car and you didn't have a driving instructor. You just had a YouTube video, and not even a YouTube video. You just had a book about how to drive a car.
I mean, to be blunt, the Germans would have been better off just not going with the 16s and just jumping straight to 17 with a new gun. Rather than developing that 16, just develop a new 17. Just go to that.
It would have been better, but they weren't going to do that. Let's be honest, they weren't. Right then, the app is definitely working at this point. At the time, from Molly Madison, at the time of the American Revolution, how different does naval history play out if Admiral Hood is seen as Admiral Graves and the two switch commands? Good luck for the French getting the Chesapeake first. The thing is, Hood is going to have a far more worked up fleet than Graves, and he's going to lead it far differently than Graves. Graves is I would say he seems to be a nice person, but he's not a very assertive or very energetic commander. In fact, he borderlines on so lackadaisical that frankly he's almost treasonous. Because he just doesn't understand the urgency of things, it seems, no matter what you tell him. But I think you'd have a very different scenario going on. I think you'd have had very different levels of cooperation going on, because you just have to look at what Hood did in Toulon to know how Hood is going to work. I think it was Hood in Toulon, wasn't it? I know he did one major cooperation with the army, and I think it was Toulon. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He was the one who was doing some interesting things at Toulon. He occupied it at the invitation of the French Royalists in 1793. Yeah, he's a very interesting gentleman. He's not backwards and coming forwards. The Navy would have been far more active under his command. Knights of everyone. Question 199. We've broken the 200 mark. Is it accurate to think that the World of Warships Tier 9 encounter with an AA battery of 1602mm and 6 octopus 4mm, quick firing market pom-pom 12, and 2 quad 21-inch torpedoes is the cruiser in a post-1939 refit? No idea. No, potentially. It sounds like it, but I haven't played that. I don't know about you, but my capabilities in World of Warships, I enjoy it, but at a certain point, my instinctual naval history approach to things doesn't match up well with the World of Warships game experience, because the World of Warships is a very good game experience if you want to play that kind of game, and if you're playing that style of gaming. But the trouble is, for me, the moment I start playing it, I can be fine on a tank simulator version or an aircraft simulator version of it, because that's fine. That's my then I'm focused on the game. But the moment I'm put in charge of a battleship in that game, my instinctual urge is to lurk around the sides of the entire map, blasting in from range, because that's how you handle a battleship. You don't drive it straight through the middle of the fjord, unless you're Warspite and you're surrounded by destroyers and you know exactly what you're running into. Not another battleship. So yeah, I haven't seen the Tier 9s, honestly. Calm Gasbook. The Panzerschief's 11s have problems exploding at River Plate. Had the Scharnhorst more powerful 11-inch shells had similar problems? Not necessarily, but they had their own issues. The trouble with the Panzerschief shells is that the Panzerschief are loaded with a lot of the earlier built shells, and again, it's one of the things the Germans improve as time goes on. Again, it's experience, so it's developed of making the shells and refining them as you go. Question 15. Continuous question 15. How would a squadron of 8 of them and 2 squadrons of tribals fare against the Scharnhorst in Rawalpindi? Now, question 13, if I remember correctly from you, was the Courageous class large light cruisers armed with 4 9.2-inch guns. So you've now got 8 things armed with 12 9.2-inch guns taking part in this battle. Basically, the Scharnhorsts are going to be sunk. You're just accelerating how quickly they're going to be sunk, and probably reducing some of the losses on the British side. But you also now want to have 16 tribal class destroyers, and 8 of those versus the poor 2 Scharnhorsts. They're dead already. You're just now killing them even more. And if the Royal Navy's deploying a hunter group like that in that area, then goodness knows what they have in the rest of the world. Hank,
basically, yeah.
You'd more likely have 2 hunter groups of 4 each and 8 tribals going around the world. But probably not even the tribals, just 4 of them each. I know post-war USN ships regularly raced each other. Did any other Navy ships indulge in this behavior? Everyone. Every single Navy. Basically, your average destroyer crew doesn't go a day without racing someone if they can. Anyone want to add to that one?
Not particularly. I think you've covered that fairly well.
Yeah, basically, destroyer crews are nuts and they're always trying to race each other. Blackmax says, Azur Lane Atago or Kantai Collection Atago? I have no idea. I haven't seen either.
Good. Let's leave that there because I don't want to deal with the weeps coming out of the woodwork.
At this point, is Dr. Dan on here, because he's usually the one who has some knowledge of these things.
Be glad we haven't got Anamarki showing up.
No.
Then again, he runs in different circles to us, so.
Didn't Anamarki nearly break Drac?
Yes, he did, and I keep asking Drac every time I see him. What on God's green earth made you agree to that proposal?
He's a nice soul. As I've said before, my friend is a very nice person, and this is one of the reasons why I do the organising of the trips, because I'm a lot less nice. And I'm the one who will go to people. That's not what we need to do.
I object. You are very nice. You've been very nice to me.
I'm very nice to people who are nice to me, and if they treat me with respect, I treat them with respect, and I work well with people like that. If you are rude or rude to my friends, don't be near me. Because I can go full academic, and I can... it's one of the reasons why they're looking forward to the Japan trip, because of the way Japan is structured, especially in museums, I'm going to have to be suited and booted and far more in my full academic form, so to speak. And
Oh my.
Dan is looking forward to it because he hasn't seen me in full academic form. And I've actually said, look, there's going to be a event at King's, hopefully in September, I think, where I think I'm going to be starting out the Lawton Naval History series. I'm just still chatting with them and checking onto that. It's either going to be me or Andrew Lamb is going to be doing it in London. And it's free tickets for everyone, and I'll make sure it's advertised and everyone can know where it was. So if they want to come along and see it, they can. And yeah, I'm going to be. I'll be in full academic mode when I'm presenting because I'm in an academic scenario, and yeah, that's going to be me suited, booted, and taking people and basically doing what I normally do in that scenario, which is presenting and like a lecture, and not being like me at home in my time off chatting with people and chatting people through the lovely naval history and giving a loosely defined lecture or loosely defined seminar, but actually doing a proper academic public lecture. And I had to say also, Gareth wants me to record some of all my old conference papers and put them in a series on our Shipshape website for people to be able to pay a little bit of money and download, because I don't want to put them on my channel because I'm worried they turn a lot of people off, because when I have done videos which have been closer to that, I tend to get my core regular viewers really like them, but the people who don't usually watch a lot of YouTube videos of naval history, if they pick them up, they really hate them, and it ends up mucking up my logarithm for about a couple of weeks every time I've done a video like that, which is why I don't do videos like that. I tend to pitch my videos as more relaxed than full academic. So basically the idea is we put them on a separate thing, and then people, if they want to see them, can go see them, and there'll be a small fee or something for it.
Fair enough. Makes sense.
Just basically enough money to make sure the hosting's paid for.
You could just open up a second YouTube channel and host them there.
I have tried doing second YouTube channels. All I can say is YouTube does not like my Gmail account enough to let me have a second YouTube channel without it driving me mildly insane. That is where I will leave it there.
I mean, I wouldn't mind having them on my channel. You could host them on mine. It would in a playlist if you like.
Potentially, but yeah, I think the other thing is, it also, if it's a small fee on there and it's people want to go see it, then we get each of us does it and does a few videos, and then that pays for the hosting for the Shipshape site and sort of keeps that paid for throughout the year for the hosting of that. I think that's another idea which wasn't said, but I think that was sort of underneath there as part of the discussion. We'll see. We'll talk it through. We'll see what we can do. Then any injuries or anything that Dr. Dan had to solve on the trip? Actually, quite a few. The only one who I don't think didn't get on well on the trip was me. I'm trying to remember now the trip. Was there any day... I have been unwell once in Australia. In Australia, one day I got woke up very sick. And I had no idea what made me so ill, but it was basically, I think it was, I'm not sure if it's something I ate or what it was, but I woke up and I had a very good moment. Ended up having to catch them up via train and bus to catch up with them where they were, because I missed them. I missed them. I think that was in, where was that? I think that was in the hotel where originally I was positioned inside a windowless room. And that was not fun. But no, on this trip I was fine. Dr. Dan did have to break out his medicines a couple of times. Our colleagues are accident prone and are pushing themselves. Question 198. How bad must things have been that the Royal Navy, desperately short of planes, did not want the Brewster A34 Bermuda Mark 1?
I would point out that it's an aircraft for a role the RAF bought them.
Yeah.
But the RN, it was an aircraft the RN didn't need. It didn't fulfill a role that they needed.
That's more of the thing. It's not necessarily bad, it's just that they had no use for it.
I mean, the RAF found them quite useful.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, from what I can see, the Fleet Air Arm assessed them, 4 as dive bombers, 1 as a target towing tug, but they just didn't take them forward.
No. Because they didn't really need them.
Like, you've got the like, by the time you've got the Bermudas coming in July 42, the Barracuda's not that far away for the RN, and that's the dive bomber the RN wants.
Yeah. And the dive bomber and torpedo bomber they want, so it does everything. It's just not what they need at the time. Could the Bremp's training ship design have been scaled up to be a good enough destroyer?
You'd have to scale her down. Because she's 1,870 tons. So she's actually about the right size for a destroyer. The thing is, though, she's more analogous to a British frigate than she is to...
In her time period, I'd say she's more analogous to a sloop.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
Yeah. Question 18. If the Japanese 25mm gun had been working on a capability on par as the American 20mm Oricons, how does change World War II? There'd be a lot more Americans who wouldn't have come home. A lot more Americans. It wouldn't have changed the results. It was just to change the casualty list and probably some of the time between battles because the Americans would have to rebuild their air groups far more, but they'd have lost a lot more pilots.
Basically, yeah. That's what you're looking at.
You know. Shanlord, perusing the internet, I found a Wikipedia article about a proposed successor to the España class called the Reina Victoria Eugenia class, specified for being 21,000 tons deep, 4 turbines, moving them at 21 knots, 8 13.5-inch guns on 4 twin turrets, and 24 6-inch guns in casemates. 12 per side, with a post-World War I proposal increasing the displacement to 25,000 tons deep and 15-inch guns. Arrangements as per the Queen Elizabeth's and ours. How useful would they have been, and if ordered in 1914... what are the chances they've been equipped with Vickers 14-inch guns, given that Sesson was partially owned by Vickers? There's a
now this is a shit I love deeply. I deeply love the Regia Victoria Eugenia class for obvious reasons, because I love the Hispanias.
But yes, I also love the Hoche, which I have to bust.
Now let me say my piece.
I would say there's a theme coming up here, but carry on.
So these ships are basically the Spanish Navy realizing that the Hispanias, while a good first step, can't really stand against anything that isn't a pre-dreadnought. You know, like, make no mistake, the Hispanias will absolutely annihilate a pre-dreadnought in a one-on-one fight. But against anything that's not a pre-dreadnought,
Lord Nelson's would like a word on that one.
Okay, excluding certain ships, the Hispanias will annihilate a pre-dreadnought in a one-on-one fight, and have an even fight against some of the larger pre-dreadnoughts.
I think there are some very nice Austro-Hungarian vessels which would also like a word on this scenario.
Excluding the special snowflake that I also love, called the Radetzky class, the Hispanias will annihilate any pre-dreadnought in one-on-one combat. But this isn't good enough, really. So the Spanish can...
There's also the Deutschlands.
No, the Deutschlands are not a match for the Hispanias.
Are you sure?
Yes. And I will stand by that.
Okay. You're right, Duke Petchington. You are absolutely correct. He does. The food does have a running taste.
Look. The Deutschlands are pre-dreadnoughts. Yes, they're very powerful. Yes, they have a good secondary battery. But the Hispanias do have direct-to-fire control, and they do have an 8-gun broadside. They will be able to dial in the range faster, and will be able to land more hits with the large guns that will tell. Because the Hispanias do have armor to resist the 6-inch secondaries of the... And they're not that superstructurally dense either. Anyway, moving aside. So... the Regia Victoria Eugenia class basically comes out of the Spanish Navy's realization that they have, that the Hispanias are a good first step, but they now need to go further and produce a decent ocean-going battleship. They're not going to be full-on pre-dreadnoughts. Make no mistake. I'm going to call them the Victoria Eugenia class just to avoid saying the Reina. Are basically super dreadnoughts on a budget.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking, but the budget here is basically range is what's being sacrificed. Whereas on the Hispanis, they were really diminutives. On the Victoria Eugenias, they're not diminutives. They're just sacrificing range and slightly higher speed to gain, the capabilities that they're getting. You're also seeing they're not going for a full.
Sorry.
What?
Chat.
Oh, Steve, come on, really? Anyway.
Is he wrong, though?
Yes, he is. Look, anyway. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So, the whole thing for the range of Victoria Eugenias was basically looking at the British capital ships of the day. Basically, because the Hispanias were basically taking Dreadnought and scaling it down. The range of Victoria Eugenias were going to be taking the Super Dreadnought concept and scaling it down, removing the 5th turret, taking out a lot of the bunkerage, and basically ending up with a diminutive. The proposal was for another 3 ships, so that the Spanish Navy would have one active battle squadron of 3 Victoria Eugenia class with the Hispanias in reserve. That was the whole thing they were going for, and then they'd repeat this. So say in the 20s, they'd order another 3 capital ships, and the Hispanias would be scrapped, the Victoria Eugenias would go into reserve, and that's how the Spanish Navy decided they were going to keep going. 3 ships in active service, 3 ships in reserve, and then 3 ships building. And that was what they were going to do. Unfortunately, World War I intervened. If they're ordered in 1914, the thing is, it's unlikely that they'll get the Vickers 14. It's the margins for tonnage are already extremely tight.
They could get them, but it wouldn't be from the UK.
Yeah, and to be
because it could be like the Armstrong 6-inch, the Armstrong 4.7-inch gun pattern gun, which we found built in the Kure arsenal, which was sold to the Russians and then ended up in Finland as on their sea defences, but then was used on their land defences during the Winter War to blow up Russian tanks. Which, if you can think about what 120mm does that, but it could also be that the Japanese end up buying British pattern 14-inch guns from the Japanese.
It's possible, but I like to think, given the margins for budget and given how much it would cost to revise the design, I still like to err on the side of them just sticking with the 13.5.
Well, the thing is, in a nice way, who's going to give them the 13.5-inch? Because the British are running through 13.5-inch barrels and producing 15-inch barrels as fast as they can for their own navy's needs during the war. The only one who has spare capacity is going to be the 14-inch guns coming from the Japanese.
Yeah, it's a fair point. So, okay, Dr. Clarke's made an excellent point. They will probably have 14s. Since this is the Spanish building program of the pre-World War I period, they will be built at home but with imported parts and machinery. So if they had been ordered, it's highly likely that 3 would be started, and as the war goes on and supplies dry up, 1 will likely be finished.
No, 3 will probably started. I'm fairly sure they end up with American engines and boilers, because they can get hold of them. They will end up with Japanese-built guns. They'll turn into an actual battlefield hot rod.
The Spanish are using a domestic 6-inch, I think.
Huh?
I think they have a domestic 6-inch to use in their casemates.
Well, they have a domestic 6-inch, but they'll use Japanese 14-inch.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure where the 6-inch guns are coming from.
And so, in nicest way, they should be... The 6-inch factory, again, produces Armstrong pattern guns. So, nicest way, it's going to be British pattern built by Spanish.
Yeah.
They'd build them because, again, if I remember correctly, the boilers they were contracting were with the same people who work with who have the partnership with the American firm, so it'd just be transferred to the American firm. There is an in 1912. There's the who are they? Browns and who? It's not Westinghouse. Who is it? It's the other turbine manufacturer in America.
They have Wilcox.
They have a partnership with them. Brown Wilcox, yeah. Wilcox Brown.
Yep.
They have basically, what would happen is literally Browns would go, "We're dealing with the Royal Navy. Wilcox, can you take this?" And they would. Because it would be a case of money.
Yeah. Knight, yes, Spain may have been a declining power, but they were not irrelevant in the global pecking order.
Yeah, if nothing else, institutional inertia, and then the fact that they do still retain some overseas basing. You wouldn't want to go out of your way just to piss them off, just for the sake of pissing them off.
It's
And
mainly
also
they
more to
have
the
the
point-
access they have in controlling the entrance to the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and you've also got Spain's. Bear in mind, there is an important thing to remember about Spain. The Spanish railway network doesn't really take off till Franco starts investing in it in the post-Civil War period. Like, yeah, it exists, but there is an awful lot of Spanish coastal traffic, especially coastal merchant traffic.
Yeah.
Spain arguably does need an oversized battle fleet for its, an oversized fleet for its overseas commitments to defend that coastal traffic. And there's also Spain's Moroccan colonies as well.
So yeah, they have dense needs because they're in the middle of a war zone. They're in the middle of a natural war zone anyway of needing these things.
If these 3 ships are built and they enter service, you're looking at a bunch of small but very punchy capital ships.
Yeah.
They could probably go. I mean, against a French ship that's not a Britannia, they're probably going to win because they'll have the armor to resist 12-inch guns, and their 13.5s will just kill a Corbeil.
Or 814s. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll just kill a Corbeil. The Italian ships is basically going to come down to who hits first, because the Spanish have the bigger guns, but the Italians have more of them. And the Italians will have more ships. But again, the same thing. It's basically 1-on-1. But if Spain is in a war, they'll have 6 battleships, 3 useful ones, 3 slightly less useful ones. The real thing, of course, is what happens when we get to the Civil War. By the Civil War, you're looking at the Spanish probably ordering the Canarias class as a trio, with the Spaniards being either in deep reserve or on their way out. When the Civil War starts, you've probably got the Canarias class, the 3 Regina Victoria Eugenia class, and whatever Hispanias aren't scrapped and can be cobbled together to get shit done. Which means
Language!
That sorry! I'll get it! To get stuff done. So it means that, funnily enough, you might actually have... I mean, the Spanish Civil War was active navally already. But you might actually have an even more navally active Spanish Civil War, including naval engagements between battle line formations, because both sides will have more than one capital ship. Just think on that for a second. You'll have the non-intervention force watching closely as these old Spanish dreadnoughts knock 7 bells out of each other. Which...
And then actually that would raise an interesting question too of how, dang it, I did it again. How would that influence the early war, World War II, capital ship designs?
A lot of these Spanish naval engagements, given the lackluster ability to modernize, I mean, the Hispanias did get modernized during the interwar period. They did get a slightly more modern fire control fit, and so the Regina Victoria Eugenias would get it too. But you're still looking at the Spanish Navy fighting these engagements as... You're looking at World War I era fleet in being, so you're looking at both sides concentrating their fleets around... like, their main warships around their battleships. Like, both sides did massively drag in merchant vessels for conversion. Like, you see everything from Spanish passenger steamers and merchant freighters to tugboats being converted into armed merchants and armed ships. Mm-hmm. Those vessels would be massively converted by both sides and would be running around doing funny things. But I highly doubt that either side would be willing to commit their valuable purpose-built warships to actions outside of key battles, which would likely result in 1 or 2 pitched battles being waged.
Yeah.
When both sides has something to gain. Probably, ironically enough, in the earliest part of the war, when if Franco has more ships at his disposal, he may choose to cover the transition of the Army of Africa. Like, yes, some will go by Ju-52, but a lot of the heavy equipment still has to go by sea. And if he can And we know the Republicans opposed that landing with Jamie the First. If the Nationalists and the Republicans both have at least 2 battleships apiece, maybe more, then there may be a pitched naval battle off Gibraltar, with the British literally watching on going, "Ooh, this is interesting," in 1936.
How do I know that Fleet is not checking the live chat?
Knight, I'm just going to say this.
No.
Obsolescence is, well, it, oh, hang on.
Knight, I think what you have to consider is, in many ways, the España and the Reina Victoria Eugenia class are what we would call the coastal dreadnought battleships of their period. And that's what you have to treat them as. So don't think of them in comparing them directly with battleships and thinking of them as being something which is going to go to sea as part of a battle fleet and fight as a battle fleet. Think of them as something which basically you can have wandering around in key areas, which you can basically say if that's there, then the only way you can win that fight is if you bring your battleships. Yes, you'll win, but it's going to be hard. So they're a case of their deterrence factor against other powers. They are going to raise the threat level to the point at which they have to fight them and have to turn up with everything. Okay. New like people also do. Question: will you be writing a guide travel book for all the places you have been?
I'll be back in a second.
And the reason I say no is because I've tried to write a series of articles for a magazine about it, and so far I haven't been happy with them and haven't sent them in because I haven't been happy with them. So, in a nice way, if I can't even get some articles done, I don't think I'm getting a book. Because, to me, I can talk about the history of it, but if trying to write a travel guide, experience of going to a place, I get swept up in the history and I don't talk about the stuff which is currently happening, and it annoys the editor like anything. Maxus, what if Nagato and Prince Eugen are kept as prizes while Nevada and Saratoga keep as museum ships? When would the ship-shaped crew visit them, and where would the US put them? Honestly, with the ship-shaped crew visiting in America is probably going to be individuals. It might be me and Dan together, because there is a couple of ships which I would like to see in America, and I'm considering doing some fundraising and going to America to see them once we've moved house, and I will take Dr. Dan along with me if he wants to come along. But I think Drax's already done a lot of them, so it's going to sound strange, but there's not a lot of mileage in terms of us all going there as a group. We don't need to turn up there as a group because we don't need to do it the same pressure as we do the others. Plus, there's the fact that when you go to see those big ships, there's usually enough interest on YouTube in terms of those videos that they will probably pay for themselves as much as it goes. Whereas we tend to do the ship-shaped trips for places which, frankly, wouldn't necessarily pay for themselves any other way. So that's why we structure the areas we go to and we pick the areas to go to. Now, you might not think of that, though, with Japan, but the reason Japan is a ship-shaped trip is because it's so expensive to go there, it wouldn't pay for itself in any way. Whereas going to America, honestly, there's enough flights, enough things, it's cheap enough that we can do it as individual trips. So basically, a ship-shaped crew will go as a crew to places and things which aren't going to get enough attention otherwise. That's why we're talking about the Hanseatic League. That's why we're talking about Crusader Island states. Because, again, it's the way it works out. And I'm hoping we can maybe get both those two, Hanseatic League and Crusader Islands, get some deals with, hopefully, with some cruise companies, where if we do some talks on board them, we'll be able to do legs on their cruise ships, because that would make things a lot cheaper for us, and we're happy to give talks. And we could then advertise as well that we're doing that and see if people would like to sort of cruise with the ship-shaped crew. We'll see about that. I mean very early discussions with them.
Like people cruising with the ship-shaped crew? That would be insanely popular.
Yeah, would we be enough, though, to justify a cruise ship basically being at our beck and call, though? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because they're pretty darn big, especially the ones, But we'll see. We're going to have a nice... those who don't know this, for TV work, I'm represented by a group called Past Preservers. And I have a wonderful agent with them called Nigel, who's actually the head of the company and doesn't represent everyone involved in it. He does have other people who help him out, but he has always looked after me personally, because apparently I'm just about wacky enough that he enjoys it. And he's got a deal with past preservers with Viking and a couple of other cruise lines that we provide, that past preservers provides the speakers. You know, they're the people who are on the agency's roster will go as speakers. In return, they get their cruise for free. So you don't get paid per se, but you get the cruise for free, and you're able to take a guest. And so the thing is, chatting with him, it's a case of, well, they might well be interested in the idea of us being there. And if we can do that, if that's going to reduce the costs for the trip dramatically, and it will do, if we don't have to worry about the costs of flights between the islands, we don't have to worry about getting between the islands, and we arrive on a pretty much predictable schedule, and we have, maybe even if we only need to be at the island for a couple of days or a day or so, the cruise line might be happy to might let us go on and get back on the ship and we go to the next island, sort of thing. We're not sure how it's going to go. But that's the thing. If we can get it, it's good. It's a nice idea. By Maximus, Akagi, what if Nagato and Prince Yu are going to... I've answered that one. But I would be on them as soon as I could be. Honestly, I would love to see those ships. Well, I'd love to see definitely the carriers. Saratoga would be definitely key on me. Is it possible to heat the hull of sub to melt surrounding solid water? That would be interesting to try and do. I think it'd be interesting to set up, but if you could run it that the water from the reactor went into the tanks, potentially it would work. Potentially it wouldn't. There's a moth coming in here trying to get to my books. That's going to be killed. Sorry, Moth. I have great respect for life, but unfortunately, books have to come first, and you weren't going out. What happens if you give World War II VN a flight-free Burke with a bottomless magazines? World War II is over in about a week. No, probably a month, because it's going to take him long enough to get around the world, but yeah. Bombs, magazines, and Vian? Yeah, that's a flight-free Burke. He'd be very happy, man. Black Moses, what names would you like or think that the Japanese will use for their two Aegis cruisers? I'd so love it to be Yamato and Musashi. I would love it to be Yamato and Musashi. But honestly...
I think you might not be far wrong there. Two largest surface assets of the IJN. Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force.
I think it might be, though. I think actually it might be Nagato and Mutsu's turn, though, first. Because I think it's their turn. Their turn to come up, I think.
Maybe.
If you consider the names they circle through. And Nagato's name for Nagato Province, I think it is their turn coming up.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
But I'm not 100% sure. Question, what happens if you give world... answer that one. So I'm going to make sure I have to put my little tick. And put my little tick.
What's next?
Luke Delaport, how effective was the Russian Navy in the Napoleonic Wars, or did they just stay in port? They were very effective in the Napoleonic Wars. Someone's always suggesting I do this as a video for Patreon, and it never gets selected. But they actually were pretty effective, and they did a lot of fighting in the Napoleonic Wars. They weren't always
like everyone forgets the two-power standard was France and Russia.
Yeah,
like, Russia were the third largest navy. They were considered a threat to the RN.
Yeah. Or rather, their forces were considered enough to be annoying in a war with the French. Although then the Royal Navy actually looked at the French Navy and the Russian Navy and went, well, you know, we're going to say they're trouble because it gets us lots of money for ships. But they've got things like the Hoche, and honestly, we're probably more likely to die laughing than from its guns.
Dr. Clarke, we agreed not to smash that ship anymore. You agreed to let me maintain my fiction.
Hey, man, when you're right, you're right. What can you say?
I still maintain that she's a viable combatant when she's commissioned.
Well, I'm certain there were rowboats she could have destroyed quite happily. After the Japanese built the Aegis cruisers, the UK decides to build 4 cruisers called Tiger, Lion, Princess Mary, and Princess Royal. How big would they be? What would they be equipped with? And how would things go when they get cancelled free, leaving only one? Not sure about the Let's put it this way. The thing I will leave aside is at the moment I do know how many designs they're looking at for potentially for the Type 83. And a lot of people keep suggesting variations on frigate builds. All I can tell you is, at the moment, at least under the previous government, and I think also under this one, they are definitely not going to be built on variations of the frigate hulls, because they're looking a lot bigger. So the Type 83... I would also say the Type 83s might actually... One of the things that's being considered, and I'm hoping goes through, is they might actually be more, because they're going to require less crew per hull than Type 45s, they might also be considering getting more of them because of dealing with the problem, because of the issues that have come up. And there is a suggestion that whilst certain people would really prefer not to have the tilt to the Pacific, there is a requirement to have a tilt to the Pacific, and having a ship which would, as well as the OPVs, but having a station flagship-like level vessel out there permanently would not be too bad.
I would like to point out that the modern cruiser is a dying breed.
I would like to point out they don't call... No, you have to understand, they don't call them cruisers, but let's be honest, the modern ships now are cruisers.
Oh no, I'm aware of that. I'm just
so that's the thing. The ASW cruiser is called a frigate. The AAW cruiser is called a destroyer. It depends on your nation what you call a general purpose large vessel, but let's be honest, that's pretty much it. And you know, you can see that from the fact that the Canadians have decided they're building a general purpose asset in their Type 26s, so the River class are going to be destroyers. Yeah, that's fine. The Royal Navy are building the Type 83s as a general purpose asset. They will probably be called destroyers as well. They could well end up being about 15,000 tons or more, which would make them definitely firmly in the cruiser size category. And if we consider the displacements of the Type 26 and even the Type 31, and we consider them against World War II cruisers, well, you know, Type 26 frigate in the Royal Navy terms is going to be 8.5, well, probably 7,700 tons is the official displacement.
I mean, I get that, but
that's pretty much that's a fairly hefty cruiser in the 1930s standard, isn't it? And if you look at their fit and what they are, Roll does. Basically, the thing is, now we name ships not for their size and scale, but for their role. I.e., this is an anti-submarine warfare level vessel, so this is a frigate. It's a cruiser in terms of its peacetime duties, but in wartime it is the anti-submarine warfare cruiser. And the same with destroyers. But the thing is, so that means the cruiser as a designation has sort of disappeared, because the cruiser, well, in the nicest way, there's two problems for it. One, cruiser isn't descriptive enough when you're telling the lovely people at the Treasury what you want to buy, so they think you're buying some sort of cruise liner. And secondly, a cruiser, the phraseology is also associated with an imperial past. So no one wants to use the phrase cruiser, despite the fact that that's what they're really building. It's like OPVs are sloops, but no one wants to call them that. Because sloop sounds droopy, to quote someone who once said that to me. Literally, in an MOD meeting, when I was describing capabilities, I said, you've rebuilt the 1920s sloop. And he went, no, sloop, we're not using sloop, that term sounds droopy. And I went, yeah, PR.
When I hear you say that, it makes me think of something of a parallel that is definitely not Little Cousin.
Save it for Discord on Thursday night.
Yeah.
After the Japanese answer that one, how much range would a modern midget submarine need if used in an anti-invasion limited convoy interdiction in the mid or similar body of water? You'd be talking about an uncrewed uncrewed asset. And yeah, it would need a decent sized range. I'd say probably about 500 nautical miles to be effective.
Oh boy, a joint question. The first one I've seen for a while.
Remember, this is Steve, the same person who's worrying about your eyesight.
Oh god.
So, and that was set at 8:45 though, so it was an hour ago, so you might be safe. So, you're in control of the Royal Navy in post-1950, and you are told to make cuts in the vessels and manpower. What would your priorities have been compared to the actualities?
Well, let me just check something real quick.
Post 1950.
Because I'm just checking something. Damn it! I can't do that. I can't do what I want to do.
Cut Victorious?
No. I was gonna restart the Maltas.
No, you can't do that.
They're long gone by that point. So, alright, well, I guess...
Well, if I'm in 1950, I'm not sending Malta Victorious in for a refit. Honestly, I'm starting from the newer ships. I'm basically going to start off with... Actually, in 1950, how many of the Audaciouses are left? They're quite... I might not have the Maltas, but the Audaciouses, let's see... cancelled 1946. Cancelled. Oh, well, so I only have 2 of those. So basically, my plan would be to turn Eagle, Ark, Royal, Implacable, and Indefatigable into my 4 ships, my 4 core ships. So that would be what those ships would be the ones I would start with modernizing. I would probably... What else would I get rid of? Probably anything I can afford to get rid of. I'm going to concentrate on preserving the newer cruisers, newer destroyers. I'm going to keep the Daring class construction line program going. I'm going to get rid of a lot of the older ships, which I keep around, especially the Seas. And I'm probably going to try... I'm probably also going to cut other things earlier on to save crewing and funding. You know, one of the things I might do in 1950 is go... Sorry, as much as I love Vanguard, and I'd love to have kept her, is go bye-bye Vanguard, because that's going to suck up money. It's kind of like I would probably get rid of all the fleet carriers that were built before Implacable and Indefatigable. I would probably they'd be gone because they've had too much damage and too much World War II. The light fleet carrier program, I'd be selling off a lot more of those. I'd want to keep 4 around for amphibious operations, but I'd also want to build 4 landing ship docks. So I could have, and each one would be paired up into, so I'd have 4 amphibious task groups and 4 carrier battle groups, and that would be my force. That would be my structure. And I'd be doing everything I could to keep that. And by concentrating on the newer ships and disregarding the older ships, then basically I had the best chance of it. I had the best chance of it because, let's be honest, the others have suffered damage in the war. Victorious has suffered damage have been rebuilt. It's just going to be expensive. You know it's going to be expensive. The idea was you can muck around on Victorious, learn lessons, and then it would be cheaper to do the others afterwards. But the reality was, once you get sucked into starting a program, no government is going to want to back out of it. So you start the Implacable and Indefatigable programs immediately. They're going to be cheap and they're going to get filled. And if you have 4 decent carriers and they don't drain the budget like Victorious does, and I seem to remember Drac calculated for the budget of Victorious you could have completed the 4 Maltas and still had money left over. You definitely can do the work on Implacable, Indefatigable, and the Audaciouses, and you end up with a decent 4 carrier set that are relatively similar to each other enough that you can operate similar air groups.
Okay. Alright, so...
What would you
personally, so for the carriers, I'm basically following you. The one thing I will be doing is, I will be scrapping Vanguard, but I'll be keeping, basically, Vanguard will go, very early. So will most of the KGVs. What I will do, though, is I'm basically going to look at, because it's 50, so the Tigers are still in their long, what are we going to build these ships as phase.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go, right. Literally, because this is the ideal time to do it. I'm going to say, right, okay. I'm going to, since the carrier's been converted with a much, I have more budget to play with. Basically, I'm going to say, right, I'm going to replace Vanguard, and I'm going to replace all of our World War II era cruisers, apart from those that literally commissioned right towards the end of the war.
Yeah.
With 8 Tigers, and I'm going to have them as slightly larger ships, but not ridiculously so, with 6-inch guns in 3 twins. So I'm not gonna break the bank on them. But I'm gonna have them be fairly sizable, fairly capable, and also room for future upgrades, basically.
I'd probably add 4 of the twin triplet of 3 inches, and then you'll be happy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So you're looking at 6-inch, 8, 3-inch. So 2 per side, possibly 1 super firing. So yeah, no. Hang on. 6-inch and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 3-inch, 2 per side, 1 super firing over the super firing front turret and the aft turret for a decent. And the reason that I've done with that much 3-inch is, well, first of all, missiles don't exist when I'm designing these, and I'm not going to have them delayed stupidly. I'm going to have them commissioning from 55 onwards, not 59. And then as we go forwards, I'm like, oh, look at all these 3-inch mounts I can get rid of. Wow, I've got lots of spare space to put things on. And the thing is, I can keep the 3-inch mounts nearest the main guns because those give broadside fire and are in a place vulnerable to blast effects when the main gun's going off. And the ones amidships can be replaced by funny things like anti-ship missiles and anti-air missiles. Because I have more room amidships to work with.
Okay.
And if I do choose to convert them into helicopter operation ships later in their life, they'll still have 2 6-inch forward. 2 6-inch turrets forward.
Yeah.
It just works.
Drakenred. Okay, I will accept that. Drakenred. Royal Navy World War II, was there anything you wish they had picked up under Lend-Lease, and was there anything makes you wonder why? Not really.
The Royal Navy hoovered up a lot of stuff under Lend-Lease. Like,
they really did.
Basically got everything they wanted.
They got everything they wanted.
Delport is... Sorry.
Sorry, go on. No, you first. You first.
I was just pointing out that Delport is asking for book recommendations regarding Russian naval activity in the Baltic during the Napoleonic Wars.
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to have to try and track down and see if the good book has an English version other than the version my friend sent me after they translated it. So let me just... Give me a second. Can you answer the questions while I'm hunting this down?
Can do. All right, what's next?
Can't really answer Blackburn's question because Doc's got to answer that.
Could the next alt history short story competition be either a pre-World War I or post-World War II Cold War setting? I'm not.
It could be, especially with Yonai. It could be. Let's say Yonai survives the next 20 years. How does he set Japan up for the Cold War? I'm not sure. It's depending on what I feel like saying and winding up Leslie with.
What is Drax?
Why don't we go ahead? Hey, Boo. Let's just go ahead and jump to
24.
Knights question 197, and then we'll skip back once Doc is free.
Oh, right. I see. Where is that?
It's if you could swap the 500 Brewster A34 Bermuda Mark 1s for a better plane, which would you choose?
Well, the RAF used it as a ground attack aircraft, I believe. I'm not very familiar with this aircraft, I'm not going to lie.
There it is. Let me look it up.
I don't think
ground attack aircraft, my brain immediately goes Skyraider, but...
Oh, there was an American aircraft that the RAF did operate as a dive bomber that was fairly successfully used in the later part of the war, but its name escapes me. Ah, the Vultee Vengeance, that's the one. The RAF really liked the Vultee Vengeance in a ground attack role. The Australians operated it and found great success with it.
Rooster.
But it was a dedicated dive bomber, so bear that in mind. And of course, the RAF found that for CAS attacks, shallow dive bombing, aka just diving in on the target, not in a vertical dive, and rocket attacks were generally better.
Answer to the Russian question. This is a very good book, but it's the only one I can find of it, so you might want to look it up. It's roughly, you're talking about. I got a copy for about that price a few years ago, so it's held on to its price. Russian warships in the age of sail, 1696 to 1860. Construction Careers and Fates by Edward Suarez and Trader John Trader and Edward Suarez. It's a very good book. It's the one I found which is actually published in English. I have a copy, as said, but there is also another book which is only in Russian, which I cannot find an actual English version available to be bought, which is also a good book, which I'd say go for this one. This one is not a bad place to start. Okay. What else were we in? I've answered that one.
So we're going to go back to Blackburn Maximus, question 22. The next one, Chandelord. I hope I did that correctly.
Any plans on visiting Spain on the short, medium, or long range? Not at the moment, but there are options out there because we're always considering doing the Peninsular Wars because they're very navally orientated logistically, and there's lots of other naval stuff around Spain. But it's a case of, at the moment, that's on our list. But also, you have to remember the time of year when we go, we have another small problem. As a rule, if we go to a place which is very full of, and this is going to sound terrible, how do I put this politely? Okay, we get coinage out of the fact that we turn up in places which don't have a lot of tourism coming to there from Britain and America, and that helps us with getting into museums. The museums in Spain do not have that problem. In fact, in many ways, they probably have the reverse of that problem. So, that's a time for when we're much bigger and we're able to help them still. But let's be honest, if you consider the places we've been, Hamilton, Ontario, Halifax, they don't have a massive tourist industry coming there for their ships from the UK, etc. Same with Scandinavia. We're hoping to improve that. Maritime especially. We're hoping to get more people coming from both Scandinavia and from us. It'd be lovely. They need more people. But Spain doesn't really have the same issue. So it's a case of Spain, we're not quite as... we're not as helpful. And one of the things we like to perceive ourselves to be when we turn up is being helpful. We, as said, we have certain rules. We pay for our tickets. We ask very kindly, and if they say no, we don't turn up. We ask the whole way through. We are very much about informed consent from the museum for what we are going to do and how we are approaching it. And the fact that museums find it so shocking that people treat them, that's why YouTubers treat them like this, worries us in many, many ways, because our experience, and my experience, I don't know about Fu and others here, of dealing with most of the people on YouTube has been they are lovely. So
exactly.
there is obviously a very small group going around somewhere who are absolutely not, but they're giving all the rest of us a bad name, and so we need to probably find out who they are and have a quiet word with them about that's not how you treat a museum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a feeling they're prank channels, but that's just me being me.
Possibly, but either way, it's just, yeah. Question, once you've fully set up a new place and given your coastal proximity, will you get a boat, even just an inflatable canoe? I probably will get a nice kayak, because I do a lot of ocean kayaking anyway. And I have one down there anyway. What is Drax's progress on Greek fire? Please do not ask that question. All I know is that him and Boom Boom Dan, aka Dan Colden, are working on things, and I have never regretted more in my life introducing two people.
I'm going to address this one from Knights. If you could swap the 500 Brewster A34 Bermudas for a better plane, which would you choose?
We already did this, didn't we?
We did, but we didn't. Better in what category? Because Are you talking better in the design role? Are you talking better in the role that they were used for? Are you talking better to maintain? Better needs refinement there. Better needs to be made better.
Question 24. What if HMS Australia and HMS New Zealand were Allied-class battlecruisers? Then there are going to be lots of people who are going to be very, very worried. And if anything, Admiral Graf Spey is going to be even more trying to avoid Australia. He's going to be even more trying to avoid Australia, because if she's anywhere nearby, he's going to want to run away. What if the Argentine carrier sunk a British carrier or two, but was sunk in turn? How does it affect the Falklands War?
I've been waiting for this question. I've been waiting for this one.
Carry on.
So, we know exactly what would happen. Well, first off, it depends which carrier. If she sinks both, the British Falklands campaign is done.
No.
They're going back to Ascension. Because the lack of ability to have air cover over... The thing is, let me just qualify. The operational planning for the Falklands depends on air support from the RAF operating from the carriers.
No.
And that's a problem if both are gone. However,
it doesn't.
If
Fu, don't take this wrong way, but no one knew the RAF Harriers were coming until after they were already down there. There was no operational air support planning for them to be arriving. They didn't realise they were coming until they were already on their way down there.
If the RN loses Hermes, the Falklands force has to turn back because Invincible alone can't.
It depends if it's before or after Atlantic Cavea arrives.
I suppose, but...
Because then they're already planning on setting up a forward operating base, so...
Either way, whether the... Well,
and you probably have a few Sea Harriers which have landed on the back of Fearless and Intrepid.
Yeah, so, me and Alex are clearly of differing opinions here, but whether or not...
No, I just know the Royal Navy, the idea of retreating is an anathema to them. They will try and figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, well... Either way, whether they withdraw or not, I can tell you what will happen in absolute point of fact. You're right that the Argentine carrier will be sunk because the British will make sure she does sink.
Yeah, there'll be the submarine tagged with her will not lose her. It will be just firing. And the thing is, in nicest way, that's the thing. Them getting in a position to actually launch, because if they'd been in a position to launch, that submarine had orders to fire.
Secondly, the second thing that happens is the American carrier fleet that was on call for this occasion comes down, just to absolutely make sure that the Falklands campaign is a victory.
I think also I would say the longer term
orders.
I would say
if the British have trouble, the standing orders were you go south and you remind the Argentinians that you do not attack a major American ally.
Yes, but I think the other thing is that afterwards is you have the British will build a carrier which will have the ability to carry airborne early warning, and everything will be blamed on the lack of airborne early warning. The loss of the carriers will be entirely blamed on lack of airborne early warning. Because it's the only way under the Cold War for it to be successful. And I don't think you see... the Invincible might still... The Invincible... if that's
I think you see the second Invincible. I think you see... Well, sorry. If the Invincible herself...
You see Illustrious.
The other Invincibles... Sorry, yeah. I think Illustrious is too far advanced to be cancelled. She'll be finished. But the other one won't be. If... It doesn't matter which carrier is sunk. If it's Hermes or Invincible or both. There will be an immediate halt to the concept of through-deck cruisers. And the RM will go... Yeah, so, you're going to give us funding for a cattle bar carrier now, aren't you?
It would be the fastest about turn, and there'll be a massive program. They'll be called Queen Elizabeth. They'll be called HMS Queen Elizabeth, HMS Victory, and HMS Falkland Islands.
Yeah.
They'd literally be that. That's what, and Victory would have its name changed to Victory 1805.
Where were we?
Just to answer a clarification that Knight has proffered, it's again the same thing, because like if you go off what the aircraft was designed for, what the Bermuda was designed for, assuming I'm looking at the correct aircraft from my Google search, if it was designed as a scout bomber, then you want probably Dauntlesses if you're still going off of the American infrastructure, because that's what was being produced in the same time frame, and the Dauntless did all right. If you want a tug aircraft, you probably don't need the bombardier slot that the Dauntless is going to have. Maybe similar flight characteristics, but as far as crew, you can save a lot of aluminum and steel and horsepower by dropping that second and I think third seat on a Dauntless. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think the American dive bombers had two, because they had a navigator gunner because the pilot was the bombardier, but in torpedo bombers they had a gunner, navigator / bombardier, and pilot.
And then if you want to use them as utility puddle jumpers, which is what the USN seemed to use them for the most because they didn't like them as tugs, then you probably want something on the order of what today we would call a Cessna Caravan or a oversized Piper Cub, because you just needed something that can carry a couple 100 pounds of gear plus a pilot and take it from point A to point B. So, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically that's what you're looking at.
So that would bring us to our next question, which is one of mine, which is we have plot armor, but what about plot speed?
Speed? Ugh, that's an interesting one.
That's the interesting point, is that things like, if you know you're going to be replacing your boilers and turbines anyway after the next refit, do you give a flying hoot if you go above what is considered the standard operating levels in peacetime?
Probably
which speeds
not.
And requirements. So that's the thing. That's when you start talking about Rodney achieving the speed she's doing. She's going in for a major refit. The turbines are going to be... Admiral Hamilton doesn't care if he strips the turbines. He doesn't care if he burns through the boilers. As long as they're not going to the point at which they're going to blow up, he's prepared to push them. And you have to remember, the boilers are always rated for higher than they run at, because they don't want to turn into bombs. So they can push them. The only ships which are ever given their speed at almost 100% capacity of the boilers are the Queen Elizabeth class. Because they wanted to show how fast they were going to be, and they knew they'd fudged up that one by not going for the small tube boilers. Because they were much more power dense. Small tube boilers produce far higher pressure steam, so far more power dense, especially for their size.
Indeed they are.
With the joyous thing that is most of the other ships, you're looking at they're giving their speed at probably about 90% of the official capacity of the boiler, and probably about 75, if not as low as 70% of the tested capacity of the boiler, let alone the theoretical capacity of the boiler. If they turn the burners up all to maximum and they let it really rip. So that's the thing.
Indeed.
There are three components you're talking about replacing in the boilers. Boilers will be the burners and the tubes, and you basically just put in a whole new boiler to replace that. You replace that old, you just put a whole new thing in. And it's the same with the turbines. It's that you burn up blades. So the thing is, this is the point when we start talking about ships and some of the speeds which they seem to have done in combat in operations. The usual trick you ask yourself is, one, how important is the target they're chasing? I.e., is it worthwhile them pushing the boundaries of their engines? And two, how soon are they due for a major refit? Because if you know you're already on your way to America, let's say, to get a major refit, you're going into a yard, you're going to have a major engine refit and all those things done anyway. Do you give a hoot if you bust up your engine chasing something? No, you don't.
Absolutely not.
So, and if that thing is a enemy battleship, it's worthwhile doing it. Is anyone going to critique you under that certain scenario for running the engines to the point to which they destroy them, basically are no longer viable?
No.
So this is the scenario. So this is why when someone turns around and goes, "Oh no, these engines couldn't achieve that because of this, and this, that, and figure," I go, "Yeah, those are the official safe operating figures, and you are more than correct about this. That's under normal circumstances. But if I've got this criteria, I'm under wartime conditions. I'm going at 2. I've got a target which is very worthwhile and very important for me to try and engage, and 3, I'm going in for a major refit to have those parts replaced anyway. My criteria for what I'm prepared to do to those engines changes greatly." It's the same like for cross-firing, firing cross decks. If you're with your turret, if you're able to fire across decks, you don't do it in peacetime fire exercises because it rips up the deck. You don't want to spend the time in dockyard to get it fixed and the cost. In wartime, if that's what the target is, you fire across the deck if your gun can do it. Mm-hmm. It's the same with firing the super firing turret over the lower turret. There is a possibility it's going to damage the gear inside due to the pressure, especially the sights, etc. So you don't do it in peacetime because you then would have to fix everything and spend all that money. But in wartime, that's where the target is. You fire.
And realistically, the amount of damage a concussive wave off of your 15, 16, or even 18-inch barrels is going to cause is probably going to be a lot worse than the 14 to 18-inch shell impacting your upper works. If that shot not fired causes the next shot from your opponent to hit.
Yes. So, in a nice way, you fire.
And also, RG, just to give you a heads up, we do have the question bot working now, at least for the moment. So if you want to resend that last message of yours with exclamation point question, all lowercase, no space, leading in front of your question, it should get carried over into the question chat over at Discord.
I'm working out how many questions we have to go.
Yes. We're actually working through them with surprising speed now.
We are doing very well.
We've beaten the ever-loving tar out of Knights 196, so that takes us up to staff.
Which one of the ship-shaped crew is most likely to try and take a vehicle for walkies around the Canadian National War Museum in Ottawa? That'd be me or Drac, because we do most of the driving when we're on these trips. Usually, Dr. Dan usually does some driving as well. The most common driver is Drac, because he really loves to drive. And I really love to drive, but I am not as nervous a passenger sometimes. Or maybe it's just my driving that's nervous, and it could be that.
I believe that Stafford is pushing for who is most likely to snag a armed and/or armored vehicle from said Canadian National War Museum.
Oh, that's me. That's me. That's without a doubt. That's me. The one of us who's most... Let's put it this way. I'm the one who goes into the engine rooms and likes to tinker around with the engines. I'm the one who is far more likely to get a vehicle started and start moving it. I love my colleagues dearly, but I am the naughtiest of us. I'm also not the one who gets stuck in engine rooms when they try and help me with the videoing. I'm not going to reveal which of my colleagues gets stuck and also loses glasses, etc. in those rooms, but there is one of my colleagues who does. He might still be listening. He might be watching. He might come on and tell us all about it, but yes.
It can't be Drac. Drac doesn't wear glasses.
These were sunglasses, and it wasn't Drac, though. Channelord. Drac doesn't get... Drac is like me. We are used to going around engines. We are fairly good at not getting stuck. We know what to look for, and also, we have a habit of... If you find us in an engine room, if you look around, you will find that we have in our hands our camera. Maybe our phone in our pocket, if we have our fancy camera in our hands. Everything else will be sat down on the floor, somewhere off the beaten path for everyone going around, in a nice safe spot, which we can see, but so we don't get caught and we don't drop it places. We're very, very careful about that, because in the nicest way, there are bilges, there are all sorts of places you don't want things dropping down into, because you will have to go down and get them. No one else is going to go down and get them for you. And you shouldn't expect anyone else to. That's the other thing we're good at as a group. We always go and get our stuff. Following the Deutschland production, how many hulls could be in water versus commission in 1939? could have got roughly about a dozen, I suppose, into commission. And probably you've got about 3 or 4 more in there. But the trouble is, when you're producing that many ships, Britain and France, etc., are going to take note. And Britain has to build capital ships anyway for managing Japan as a threat and Italy as a threat. What they do for you is they will be producing probably 9.2-inch gun vessels. And they will produce a lot of them. Or alternatively, they'll be producing renowned versions of ships with 14-inch guns. In which case, they might well... it could cause things to be different for the King George V's. But they'll either go for 14-inch guns or 9.2-inch guns. They won't go for 12-inch guns because they don't have the production line. Those are the 2 guns they actually have a viable production line for at that time, instead of that variance. Question. Opinion on the Victory 1 Star Destroyer from Star Wars. It's an
I don't
okay
mind
vessel.
The Victory. The Victory 1 is a bit too specialised for my taste around missiles, but the Victory 2 is a perfect vessel to police a galactic empire. It's about the right size, you can really mass produce. So if the analogy goes something like this, if a Imperial 1 shows up, you have warranted the equivalent of an armoured cruiser showing up. If a Victory 1 shows up, you're looking at a first-class protected or second-class protected cruiser showing up, is the basic analogy here. That's the best way to analog it. It is 20 past 10, and I do have work tomorrow morning, because yes, I am now gainfully employed. Yippee.
We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28 questions to go. Shall we cut the questions off at 30 and then we just finish off these questions?
Yeah.
So, Runon, if you could stop it when there's a couple more have come in, and then would you mind staying until we finish the 30 we're working through? Because I'll probably have them work through in about half an hour to 40 minutes.
I do have some things to do before I go to bed, and I do have to be up at 7:30, so I'm sorry, but I would like to just answer one more question before I go.
All right.
It's because it's specifically addressed to me.
All right.
Dr. Alex Clarke, as Fleet has failed to explain the benefits of buying F-18 instead of doing what France did and building a domestic design like they did, what are they? Well, I will explain. Basically, it's cost reduction, bulk buy, lack of risk, and commonality of parts across all NATO carrier fleets. Going with the domestic British design that you were talking about, first of all, it was designed as a
Is this from Knight 6831?
Yes.
Which...
Yep,
it's basically about not going with the Hawker Siddeley 1206.
Leave me, I will find it's a ticket.
I got it.
It's just a few. Yeah. The reason that I'll say why I think they shouldn't have done it, and then because it is addressed to you as well, Dr. Clarke. I'll let you explain why buying the F-18 is. But basically, as far as I'm concerned, it reduces risk. It increases commonality of parts across the NATO carrier fleets because now the British, French, and Americans all operate the same basic general-purpose carrier aircraft. It works. It means that it massively reduces the cost for fleet replacement for the British, which is a big thing to sell to the government if you're looking to build new carriers, or even just or even if you're making the argument for new Catabar carriers, it's a massive selling point to say we can massively chop the cost down if we do this. And it can also be made to benefit the RN and the British manufacturers by doing what the RN did to the Phantom and Britishizing it. So creating a British version that shares most of the common parts, but may, for example, employ a British radar and British engines. It basically just to TLDR, it massively reduces risk to the British government and the Royal Navy, and massively increases benefits to NATO commonality. but I'll let Dr. Clarke expand on that / give his own reasons.
Honestly, the main reason is because the British want to keep a domestic program going, and if they can buy into the American program and get existing production line going and it's a precedent, it's useful for them. They've repeatedly tried that with various programs over the years because the way to keep domestic production capability going, but also spread the design and development cost and be able to produce a first line aircraft. So honestly, I think, and it might have set a precedence whereby the Americans don't do what they do with the F-35 program, which is lock us out the software. Which, despite us paying to be a first-tier partner, they have done, because we did that so we could get our own, could do our own modifications and implement our own weapons without having to go through them. And they then said we couldn't, and it's caused ructions in the F-35 procurement. And you could say you can put down the pace of British F-35 procurement. You can directly put it over to dispute over that code and that access. There is some definite reasons for it, and it's one of the scenarios of we're locked in because that's the only real option. That's the only real production line in service that worked for us in the West. But it's a case of it is annoying, and it is a problem. But there again, the F-35 is worth it. But the trouble is, the American, it's the classic sort of some of the protectionism you have, is that the Americans are worried it's actually if we started selling if we'd implemented a Meteor, how many other nations would want to buy the Meteor to use as their missile versus the American one? And yeah, it's let me put it this way. For America, on a strategic level within NATO and within the world, it's better for them to be competition. It drives their own missile systems and their own companies to be better behaved and work better. But for the American defense companies, they don't want competition because that means there's competition for profits, and so you end up with issues. But that will be sorted out. I have a feeling that's going to get sorted out because the problem that's coming down the road is that there has been a realization quite recently, and it's disturbingly recently how quick this realization, that actually it's better to these kind of disputes, they just cause trouble within the alliance and within our groups, and you need each other, because whilst America is as powerful as it is, we are now emerging into a world which is returning to what I would say is the normal state of human affairs, in that it's not a unipolar world. It's a multipolar world, and there are degrees of polarity and of how powerful nations are, because nations can be very powerful within their own specific region, but terrible on the global stage, etc. And it can be in the inverse. Though there are nations which are very powerful globally, but regionally they're really not that powerful. Good example of that is the UK. The UK has great global reach, but you stick our army up compared to most of our European neighbours, it's pitifully small. But the thing is, Britain hasn't really needed that, and doesn't really need that because we don't have the land borders to justify that. So we often invest in things like technology, like the Navy, like the Air Force, as our reach and capabilities. So you end up with a nation which is actually on the global power scales and the global reach capability, very powerful, probably one of the more powerful nations in the world, one of the very few who has an actual global expeditionary capability. But on the flip side, and compared to some of our neighbours regionally, we have the technology, we are very capable, but we certainly can't. If people talk about going, oh, we need to establish a division in Poland, etc., to help us good, and we go, yeah, how many divisions do the Polish army have? How many does the German army have? And how many are they building up to? The French? Yeah, our division is going to signal our great and utter support for it, but it's not going to be many troops overall. And if you want to do more than that, you're probably going to have to gut the Navy and the Air Force. And can we really afford to do that in the modern scenario? You used to be able to do it in the scenario because you could do it in the Cold War, in the post World War II to 1990s Cold War, because in many ways, Europe was the decisive theatre, and everything was centered around Europe. Well, that made the world a bipolar world. It was basically between two poles, and the quickest access was across Europe for the two of them. Yay. But the thing is, we're not in a bipolar world, we're in a multipolar world, and suddenly, do you want to reduce that strategic flexibility the Navy and the Air Force give you to have an army which can only deal with one of the scenarios that you could face? That's the problem. That's the strategic question the British had to face. And people often put that as the continental versus blue water strategy, but honestly, it's which do you place the emphasis of British security in? And British security is probably based in an alliance structure anyway these days. It has been for a long history. Let's be honest, it was the Empire alliance of World War I and World War II that the British Empire was fighting as. We've been an alliance-based security structure for a long, long time. And that's been fundamentally part of it. Yes, we were the cornerstone of that alliance. And we're not the cornerstone of the NATO alliance. We're one of the foundational stones, but not the cornerstone of it. But yeah, it's a reality you have to deal with. Did that answer the question, or did I go off on one completely?
I think you answered the question by going off on one, which is actually fantastic.
Oh, good.
Right, I'm sorry to have to leave you, gentlemen, but I do have to.
All right.
I have to stand up for 8 hours tomorrow, and then I got to do ramblings later. I assume I'll see you tomorrow, Dr.
You
Clarke,
will do. Take care.
So you can pay me back.
If I forget, I'll be reminded by my mum, who watches you every week.
Enjoy the wage cage. I'll be in mine myself.
Hey, we've all got to do it.
I will be going to a... Well, first of all, I've got to find some money, because joy of going on the trip to Scandinavia. I didn't go. I think Knight originally thing I thought that when I did that video about blowing the budget, I'd gone bankrupt or something. I hadn't done that. It's just that my budget for books had been one thing, and I ended up spending my budget for books and on other things as well, including the trip to Tallinn, which I'm really happy to do. I not only spent my budget for books, I spent my budget, which I'd put aside in my account, for buying a bed and bed frame for the new house for myself. And the budget I had mentally put aside as, this is what I'm going to have if I return home and find I have to fix things which I don't expect to fix. And one of the things I've got to go buy tomorrow is I've got to go buy some wood. I've got to go buy some 3mm or 5mm plyboard. A nice big sheet of it to reinforce the back of my sister's chest of drawers. Because despite them being an IKEA set of drawers, they got broken. And instead of her going, right, no, I won't take them with me, I'll get a new one when I'm down there, she's very for sustainability, so she wants to keep them. So I think I'm probably going to end up spending the same amount of money as the chest of drawers cost on buying a piece of wood to take to put on the back to reinforce and hold it all together.
Oh dear.
But the joyous thing for her is, of course, that's on me spending that money, not her spending that money. Because apparently it's my job. Ah, well, that'll be life. I'll sort it out.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care.
I'll see you all when I see you. Goodbye.
Have a good one.
Take care. Right then.
Alrighty.
So, let's say... Let's go back to...
6831, question 195. So as the Joffre class carriers were going to get the F4F-3 base Grumman G-36 Alpha Wildcat fighters, Douglas SBD-3 Dauntlesses, and SB-2U-2 based Vought V-156-F Vindicator dive bombers, Brewster SB-2A Buccaneer scout bombers, and Burkett Bray 810s torpedo bombers, would this have been what they'd get?
I hope not, because that's no. That was about right, but it's still going to be a logistical nightmare. That is an absolute logistical nightmare. That many aircraft types on that size carrier.
We've got two dive bombers, 3 dive bombers, and a torpedo bomber and fighter. By the look of it.
Honestly, those aircraft are at different periods what they're going to get, a mixture of combination of them. But I don't think at any point would they have all of those aircraft operating there. And question 194. If the S6F Hellcat is a mediocre improvement of the F4F, is it in trouble against the A6M0? A mediocre improvement on the F4F? Probably not, because the F4F, with the right tactics, was able to handle the Zero quite happily. So as long as it's an improvement on the F4F, it should still be able to do as good a job as the Wildcat in handling the Zero as it was. It was a far better improvement. But let's be honest, let's build around a massive engine.
I would also add in on top of that, even if you do only have, let's say, a 25% improvement over the F4F, or whatever qualifies as mediocre, the U.S. can, as an average portion of its Air Force, sustain higher casualties without losing the experience versus the Japanese. Yeah. So every time the Japanese lose a fighter pilot, they lose a significant fraction of their overall competency. Every time the U.S. loses a fighter pilot, it loses a much lower fraction of its overall combat competency. So it's a yes, but actually no question.
Yeah. It's all those things of always. Can I? Question 26. How much to watch and review one episode of Azur Lane or the Kantai Collection? Let's see. How much is my current credit card amount?
Well, given that I have been bribed to never bring up a certain satirical fantasy movie.
Yeah, again, by a bottle of Iron Brew.
By a bottle of Iron Brew shipped internationally.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that is a not insubstantial sum.
I would say that's a not insubstantial sum, but it's not a bad sum either. For me, it's going to be a couple of bottles of 1901 and probably a couple of bottles of regular Iron Brew coming away. That's my plan. Once I'm moved and I'm located and I can amass them and put them together and send them as a group to you. But to review one episode of Azur Lane or Kantai Collection, let's see, how much to do that. I'm going to put together all the big bills I've got coming up, and I've already got money worked out for where they were coming from, but if money could come from somewhere else, I'd be quite happy to take about 18 grand. How's that sound? £1,000, that is. £18,000. I'm going to make it cheap. That pays for car insurance. That pays for all my other insurances I have to renew at the end of this month. All 6 of them I have. That pays for all the other things I've got to do, and all the stuff to do with the house, etc. That are big bills coming out, which are supposed to come out of the money for this house, but if they could come up from somewhere else, then I've got more money for the other things to do with the build. I can actually have a decent cooker for the kitchen, rather than whatever happens to be in one of my, well, honestly at the moment what's sitting in our hallway, because it's a cooker which we have spare, so that's come with us, and it's a nice one, it's a newish one, but that's going to be my cooker in my new kitchen, and I could get a nice new one rather than one which is a bit old, but fine. I'm going to be practical. If someone wants to give me a whole new kitchen and pay all my insurances and allow me to pay off my pay off the amount I have on my credit card, yeah, I'll watch an episode of Azur Lane or the Kantai Collection. Do I have to record it as well? Because you just asked me how much to watch it, not how. You said review, so yeah, I presume I have to record it. So yeah. Question 1: the laugh after you read my first question was delightful and will haunt my dreams. Thank you. I'm glad. Frankie Molly. If you could overrule Churchill and unpause construction on 2 capital ships, which 2? Why do I have to be capital ships? If it was going to be which 2, it's going to be the 2 which I could get built most quickly. And the nicest way, I'm going to unpause Prince of Wales and Duke of York, because I can get those built most quickly. I can get those into service most quickly. If I could do it on any carriers, it would again be the 2 I can get completed most quickly. That's the most simple thing to do, because the quicker I can get something into service, the better. that's out for, as much as I'd love to unpause the Lions, unpause the Implacable and Indefatigable, I'd love those ships to be completed earlier, but the thing is, they're still going to be quite a way away. Whereas if I unpause Illustrious class and King George V class vessels, they're going to be completed by 1940 probably, in which case they're going to be definitely worked up and well in service in 1941, which is going to be a very useful year to have extra ships available.
Anybody in shipshape run a 3D printer?
Anyone in shipshape want a 3D printer? We all want a 3D printer.
Well, run, own, currently possess one, and are making use thereof.
Draken and Gary are sort of two who are potentials, but I don't think Eva's actually running one at the moment.
RG, just to bring up, just to answer your question, it's not going to be so much that Dr. Clarke would need therapy from watching Azure Lane on the merits of watching a native Japanese anime that's either been subbed or dubbed. It's probably more to do with the fact of that's not how naval combat works in any way, shape, or form, or how ships work in any way, shape, or form, and it might slightly break him. Because I have seen some of Azure Lane, see where the problems would begin.
My suggestion is that I would have enough iron brew, I would survive. And if I have the joy of knowing I'm looking forward to a nice new kitchen, which I have I have a decent fridge and decent things on that. Because basically the thing is, as I said before COVID, I was moving between various different universities, wandering around. I had some of my stuff here, some of my stuff at different places. I spent months teaching in Cambridge, and I had very nice residence there. But it was a case of it was fellowship halls. I've never had a place on my own which has had its own kitchen, etc. And with the new property of me having my own annex, I'm going to have my first own kitchen, and we're going to have to build it to fit it on the site, because currently the building only has one kitchen. It has an annex, but the annex doesn't have its own kitchen mode, so we're converting one of the other spaces which are connected to my space into a kitchen. And it's going to be a lovely little galley kitchen. I'm going to really like having it, but I'd love it to be done properly rather than what it is going to be, which is a mix mash of things. It'll still be my first kitchen, so I'll still like it. In the nicest way, it'll still be my first one that I don't have to share a fridge with either my mother and sister or half a dozen other people. And don't take it the wrong way, it's a toss-up between whether student halls or my sister I have found weirder things stuck in the fridge. I love my sister, but her food experiments stuck in the fridge can be scary as anything to see.
I can answer this one because I looked it up.
Yep.
While we were working its way to it, the F6F was designed to take the R2800 before it went into service.
Mm-hmm.
It was re-engined based on experience learned from the F4Fs versus the Zeros that they needed the bigger engine, so it entered service with that 2,000 horsepower engine.
Cool. Shanlord, if Rodney had suffered an engine casualty on her way to execute Bismarck illusions, prospects of King George V and Renown versus Bismarck? That's certainly the nearest capital ship to go in and support her. They probably don't need Rodney to be that actually engine viable to do what she's going to do. But what they might do, therefore, is actually have Rodney and Renown come in and have Renown stand back. So basically what you'd have is King George V would be getting closer, but closing to the point at which he could do plunging fire. Rodney closing to the point at which they could do direct fire straight in from almost point blank range, and Renown sitting from range doing sniper shots. Just to give them the balance, just in case anything happened. And, that's the scenario. That's why you keep even Ron if he has them. That's more what they do.
What did the RN not like about the Hellcats? Knights 192.
They liked them, really. They didn't really have any major complaints about them. I think they would have liked them to have more powerful guns on them, like cannon or i.e. more powerful cannon, etc. But they were happy with the ones they had, the weapons they had. They worked fine. It's just the Royal Navy want like bigger guns at that point because the RAF was getting bigger guns. It's that typical level of competition with your siblings. If the Bremps at 2,054 metric tons, full displacement was scaled up to a Z1 Lebrecht, mass 3,207 metric tons, how much capacity was gained? Is my weight for the Bremps incorrect? That's full displacement rather than standard, so that's about fine. So I think it's broadly speaking from memory correct. I'd have to look it up to be 100% sure. But yeah, how much capacity be gained? It depends, but you would probably, your engines would be taking up a smaller percentage of the ship for producing this required amount of power, because engines are power dense. Depending on how many weapon systems your crew needs are not going to increase, so your capacity could go up greatly depending on what you use that extra 1,000 odd tons for, or rather 1,200 odd tons for. Calum Gosberg, speaking of post-World War II, World War I Spanish capitals, were Škoda allowed to build naval guns and turrets? Technically, there's nothing stopping them from memory of the treaty, stopping Škoda specifically producing such things. Realistically, politically, there would have been major issues with it. Major issues, even with who Škoda at that point were. Okay, I'm not getting involved in the debate going on between Timu and Runon in the chat. That's quite disturbing on some levels. Mainly because I have spent a lot of time talking to Runon over the years, and I have met Timu, and it's kind of jarring both my minds, the ideas coming from the chat. It's mildly scary when you actually know the person, and then you see the words and you go, I don't need that image in my head. Question 28. What if the Spanish Civil War led to an early war between the Allies and Comintern versus the Axis? Then, as pretty much every time I've done that in Hearts of Iron 4, because I have a habit of, when you get the options to declare war on Germany in 1937, 1930, I think I declare war. And I have everything prepped as well, so I can quickly launch it straight then. And I have pushed rearmament fast. And I launch it hard then. And usually, I can overwhelm the Germans in 1937-38. So, yeah, basically in that case, the Germans get beaten up quite early on, because they're nowhere near even worked up properly with their rearmament program at that point. And the Italians don't tend to get involved in it, so, yeah. Dan, you think you're muted on Discord? Give me a second. Dan, why have you muted yourself?
And it's client side, so we can't unmute him.
Yeah.
Oh, there he goes.
Hello, Dan. You muted yourself. You better now.
Oh, at least his client is unmuted. Don't know if he's transmitting otherwise.
Dan, we can't hear you yet. At least you've unmuted yourself now, so that should be a good start. But, yeah. Alright. Powder Monkey is now no longer enabled.
Woohoo!
Right, and getting back
And then
to
it's
the...
just a simple re-enable when you're ready to go.
Yay.
Next week or Thursday or whatever. So, hopefully.
I think I'm going to try and keep using this for the Sunday Bruships, because these are the ones which are getting long and having lots of questions. Okay. So speaking of that, we are at Inns. Is there a reason why Hawk gets cruisers named after him instead of battleships? Yes, there is. He rather liked them more. He was always known for speed and for cruising warfare, and that's what he was really associated with. So he fits more with frigates and cruisers than battleships. But I think there was actually a battleship named after him. I think it was one of the earlier ones. Or it might have been an Age of Sail ship. I'm going to have to look that up. Question 29. If the Swedish kept one of their coastal battleships as a museum ship, who on the ship-shaped crew gets on board first, and what would you like to see on them? It's going to be a race between me and Drac to see who's first up there, and one of us is going to be racing towards the engines, and one of us is going to be racing towards the guns, and we'll probably meet in the middle at some point, squealing. Nightsaber 301. Why is it forgotten that World War II itself is why the F6F, Hellcat, and F4U Corsair are so beloved? I don't think it is really forgotten. They are indelibly associated with World War II. That's what brought them about.
Yeah, and I can think of numerous stories about the F6F where people are like, yeah, we could have never done this in a Wildcat. And as far as I know, the F4U's problems were the gull wing made it a weird plane to fly based on the relative to the straight wings, so there was a training curve.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the problem with the F4U. It's the training curve. Hank, if the French stuck with 13-inch main guns, how much better or worse would the 16-inch gun, the 13-inch ship with armor to protect against larger caliber guns like the Charnos be, instead of the 15-inch ship guns like the Wrigley's? 16 13-inch gun. 16 13-inch gun. Woo, that's going to be a big ship. If it's built to treaty limit, it's not going to be a fast ship either. Oof. Honestly, it's not going to be much. It's not going to be worse, but I'm not sure it's going to be better. It's going to make up for its attacks with volume of fire, and it's going to suddenly have a lot of that. So it's going to be about the same, honestly. Black Maximus, if all the Admiral-class battlecruisers are being built, how will the British adjust their infrastructure to fit them? Slight expansion of ships and dry docks just to fit, or made much larger? They would say they needed to expand them, and they'd make them much larger so they could fit the next generation. So then you'd have a whole different scenario for carrier procurement and other things procurement, and you might see their carrier plan. Because I'm fairly certain one of the missing designs from the specs I've read of it, one of the missing designs from the illustrious sort of design, the design study which leads to the illustrious class and the implacables for a different study and a section study, etc. I think it was a county-inspired armored hangar carrier, if that makes sense. I'm hoping you can all guess what I'm talking about with the county class there. The fact that the 4-inch plates magically appeared that turned their armor into almost a continuous belt. Yay! That was surprising. Where did those come from? It's a similar scenario for the hangar, hangar walls. Question 188. Would I be right that the SS Osorio-based class aircraft carrier is based on the same idea as Argus? It's not too dissimilar, no. Question 189. Follow on to question 188. Could the I-class aircraft carrier have been completed, and would the Royal Navy want to get their hands on it and keep it from anyone else? Not particularly, but it would be interesting to use. And they would probably try and keep it from other people, because they would say they were the best place to test it and evaluate it because they're in prior experience. Question 187. Wouldn't any early Gloucester F-534 based fighter aircraft initially use 8 7.7mm Browning 303s and later Mark 1s fitted with 20mm Spanair cannon It's going to depend how long they're in development for, but yes, potentially that's the same system, the same flow which many British fighters go through. Question 186: Wouldn't a non-declined Royal Navy be as paranoid about aviation fuel management if they were building a nuclear supercarrier? They would always be paranoid about it. Let's be honest. And the experience, there were lots of discussions about the Dasher and experience, and as I said, I've heard various things put forward ideas that the aviation fuel tanks were too close to where people smoked, and there was fuel pipes, or there was a way for a lit cigarette to manage to get down pipes from the I think it's the pilot's mess space to the fuel tanks, to petrol tanks, and I'm not sure if that's the case myself. I do worry about that, because I would have thought someone would have designed that already out of the ship. I think it's far more likely you have an aviation fuel management system. The Americans have things which are their systems, where they were designing and fitting to ships at the point, was very manually orientated, because that's the system they were using. The British crews were trained around a very much more automatic, and one of the complaints you have in the British system is that the British crews have not been given specialist training and enhanced training for this system. They hadn't really adjusted their protocols for the American system, and the British also sort of the reports basically split. And when I talk about Dasher, in that they're equal, most of them are blaming both the system and the British protocols, and the Americans' version of reports are emphasizing the British protocols, and the British systems are emphasizing the systems. And basically, it's a classic thing of the American protocols are designed around the American systems and the way the Americans operate those systems. The British protocols are designed around the British systems and the way they operate those systems. And that's why it becomes so important for them to do the work where they are modifying the ships when they come into British-style systems. And one of the people often comment that it does, after the Americans complain about time taken, it does get quicker, and the British start to do less work. Well, one of the reasons they start to do less work is the American systems start to move a lot closer to the British systems in design, which is one of the reasons why they drop in fuel tonnage and fuel capacity for those systems, because they are using British-style methodologies and closer to the British system. So that therefore, the distance between the American system and the British system becomes less on the American side in the building process, and therefore the work the British have to do to get it to fit with their systems and their methodology of work and training is less. So it's a case of it glows together. And I will say, there were about 3 people who got very mad with me on the Bow class video about mentioning this and discussing that. And one of them managed to put so many swear words in their 12 comments that they put down, that, as we all know, my system has, despite and now I've got a bleeper. I found a bleeper. I'll be using that on the Foo when he's on next again to make sure I keep to it. In that I have quite strict, because of my little cousins watching the videos, etc. I can only set one standard. It doesn't matter whether it's for the chat or comments. I have to set one standard. So I have a standard which basically says swear words aren't getting through. And they managed to put so many swear words in their 6 comments. They got, not only all of them were put into the review section, not published, but they managed to put in another one about me not allowing their comments through, and how I was being very rude because of it. I was asleep at this entire time. The only reason I know they managed to get so many messages is I woke up this morning to an auto message, which was, this person has managed to cross a threshold and they've been automatically hid from the channel, because they managed to do that to themselves. And I have never hidden anyone from the channel other than spam bots. I've never used that before, so I had to go through that to try and find that, and then I then looked at the comments manually and I decided not to unhide them, because frankly I didn't see the point. I wouldn't publish them anyway myself, because of my rule about swearing, and because literally every other word was a swear word and being an insult to me, not a constructive point. And when I say these comments were long, they were about that much amount of writing, if we go by that screen next to me, long, each of them, and almost every other word was a swear word and insult on me. So it's fun. I never understand the people who do that, because you're wasting your time. It's not going to get through the YouTube filters.
One thing I would add to Knights' question is, I believe if it was possible for any service to become more paranoid about a threat, the RN would become more paranoid about fuel management on a nuclear supercarrier, because you got to remember, if you have a turbine or a steam plant powered carrier and it burns to the waterline, that's expensive, that's embarrassing, you're definitely going to be losing trained crew. But at the end of the day, you send a tug out there, maybe a few oil spill recovery vessels, you clean it up, and then you go on about your life. If you have a nuclear carrier that burns itself to the waterline, you now have an entire area of the sea or the coast, which is a no-go zone until you can get very, very specialized hazmat CBRN equipment out there to recover the fusion reactor and the fuel, or fission reactor, excuse me, and the fuel. And the area is going to be decimated for quite some time in all likelihood. So if they could get more paranoid, they would be more paranoid.
And I would add that aviation fuel is not something you want to play around with. The amount of times I read things like, especially post-World War II, oh, this was sabotage, this accident. And you go, no, there are many things you can do as sabotage to stop a ship going places, especially in the engine room, without risking yourself. Starting a fuel fire in the hangar or on the flight deck is a good way to kill yourself, not to sabotage the ship. So that's an accident. You know, it's one of those things where people want to read things into things when they're not there. Question 185. Would I be right to think that if British got the F-4 Phantom in 1964 instead of 69, they would have served alongside a Sea Vixen before replacing it later? Yes. It would phase into service like they normally do with things. They phase them into service. It probably wouldn't have been serving till 69 alongside the Sea Vixen, because I think the Sea Vixen would probably been out of service by about 65, 66, but it would have been phased into service. If a nation like the Dutch or Belgium wanted to have a navy post-World War II and are asked to buy surplus, what ships would you consider? They do have navies post-World War II, and mostly they buy British. Honestly, go and have a look at their navies post-World War II. You will find a lot of British. I think the Dutch actually operate a British carrier for a while. They have a carrier. How much would the British proposed Blackburn Buccaneer S3 with its 18,000 pound external payload from 6 pylons and 4,000 pound internal bomb bay be over the older Blackburn Buccaneer S2 with 12,000 pounds external payload and 4,000 pounds internal bomb bay? It would be useful. It's going to be a nice extra bomb truck. That's an extra 6,000 pounds of bombs. So that's an extra 3 2,000 pound bombs or 6 1,000 pound bombs you can carry. That's useful. No one's going to complain about having that. You're probably going to see it loading up with 3 2,000 pounds and 3 1,000 pound bombs under each wing. That's a bomb truck roll, and an extra couple of, you know, probably things like, I think they usually like to carry 2,000 pound bombs internally, so they probably carry 8. They'd probably carry 8 of those, 8 2,000 pound bombs, and 6 1,000 pound bombs. That's a fairly decent load. Would the British in the Cold War have been better served with the 6 Avro Vulcan K2, 11 Handley Page Victor K1, and 14 Victor K1 and 21 Victor K2 as purpose-built tanker aircraft? They'd certainly have less of a logistics nightmare if they'd gone with a single group of purpose-built tanker aircraft. Let's be honest. If you're going to have some tanker aircraft, you ideally would like them to have commonality, and I'd say if you've got 52 of the same aircraft, you can probably generate more aircraft than 52 of 5 different types of aircraft. No, 4 different types of aircraft. Yeah. Question: with 511 billion barrels of oil found off Antarctica, are we looking at a Falklands War 2.0 come 2040 when the treaty comes up for renewal? Not likely. And there are many treaties which come up for renewal at various points. That treaty will probably be a very quietly, very quickly done treaty, because the powers involved want it to be very quick and quiet. I won't be surprised if some powers try and push in, some nations try and push in, but it's going to be an interesting discussion of how they push in.
And also to keep in mind that the Argentine economy right now is not doing particularly well, and their current leadership means that by the time 2040 rolls around, they may be dealing with the consequences of a very constrained procurement stream.
To be honest, their current leadership is trying the only medicine which might actually work long term for their economy, but it's going to be a very painful process going through it. The medicine to try and fix the Argentinian economy is almost as bad as the disease, and for a certain while it's certainly going to look worse. Because the Argentinian economy has got that problematic. And I say this as I'm not even sure if their medicine they're prescribing is the right medicine. It's just one of the options available, and frankly, none of those options are good. It's a classic dilemma scenario to try and fix that economy. Because the Argentines have got themselves into a very interesting version of an economic mess, with their different governments pursuing nothing related to an sensible economic policy for a long time. Mike says, what if the invincible class carriers were an extra 10,000 ton standard? What could they be fitted with? And how does this affect the World Falklands War? Probably they'll be taking an extra load of Harriers, but a lot more Harriers, and they'd be a bit faster and a bit bigger. So the Harriers would have a longer runway to take off, which would allow them to probably take off slightly heavier bomb load. They'd be faster going into the wind, so that would again help them carrying slightly more things. And they could take more aircraft. Now, the biggest advantage would be if it's big enough, and let's say their standard load of aircraft is, let's say, 24 Harriers and 24 Sea Kings. Then who knows, if they're being built and designed for that from the get-go, someone might have gone, okay, we really need 6 of those Sea Kings to be airborne early warning aircraft. And they might have, considering how quickly they got that ready in around time of the Falklands War, they could have had that in service before the Falklands War, and you could have had a very different Falklands. Knight 681, how could one extra 911 King George V, Iron Duke, and 1 Tiger change World War I? Not much. They really wouldn't change things a lot. They just give you a couple of extra ships in certain critical places. An extra Tiger would be quite useful in the early phases of Jutland and a few other battles. Who knows what the extra Tiger might be carrying, who might be aboard, how that would change things. And the extra 13.5-inch guns would not be a bad thing to have at Jutland. It'd just be useful having extra guns, but honestly, those extra ships are not going to change the equations that much. And they're just going to make things a lot more difficult for the Germans. What would have happened had the US government approved the L1133 and its power plant? Would the Navy be interested in that, and what would they do with a power plant? The L133.
That is essentially, I just looked it up, that is essentially a jet-powered ascender with axial flow turbines. I don't think they would have used it personally, because you've got the typical constraints of carrier aircraft, and looking at the J-37 / L-1000 power plant, I am not seeing anything that is exactly earth-shattering compared to other available power plants at the time.
Honestly, I would be surprised if it actually gets used. But if they had been, I doubt the Navy would have used that, because honestly, for them, for carrier operations, recovering that's going to be a nightmare. Because there's one thing making that fly as they're doing it for the land, but making that fly so it can do a controlled crash on like you land on a carrier with. That design is not what I would choose at that point in history, if that makes sense. And I'm saying this without showing you the design, but yeah. And let's see if I can.
If anyone's familiar with the Ascent, which is that pusher configuration prop aircraft, loosely based off of the P. I want to say it was based off the P.
Here is the picture from Wikipedia. There you go. As you can see, imagine making that in a shape and form which is going to take a carrier landing.
Yeah, looks neat, but
it's cool as anything, but no. Dan, are you now able to talk with us?
Well, he muted himself again, so.
Oh, Dan. HMS Indefatigable in 1912, April 1914, is going to a port visit to Washington, D.C. When she hears Titanic's distress call, 12:15, she strips the turbine but makes it by 1:45. What changes? A lot of the crew people get recovered, because she has a lot more recovery gear on her than most other ships. She has a lot more recovery gear. And she's going to be able to... She actually might be strong enough and quick enough to, if she's there by that point, to... I don't... She couldn't really pull alongside her, but she could certainly get close to her. And using the Navy's boats and Titanic's boats, they might be able to get a lot of people off and onto her. She gets there quickly enough, you can save a lot more people. Also, you have to remember the way a warship is built. It's actually almost easier to pull people up onto a warship at the time than it is a merchant ship. Because your hull, as a rule, your deck is lower to the waterline than the merchant hull, which is built as a very big hull to take stuff inside its terminal volume. A lot of like merchant ships today. Question 181: If the Colossal Gladiator Mark II had served the Swedish as the J-8 Gladiator was a fixed undercarriage monoplane fighters, how much trouble is that for the Soviets? Well, I presume when you're saying they transferred that to the Finns for the Winter War, it's not going to be nice for them to deal with. But let's be honest, the Finns are dangerous in whatever aircraft they're dealing with. Would it be correct that if Prince Eugen was hit by one salvo from Hood, she's had it? Honestly, one salvo would do a massive... If she's hit by all 8 15-inch shells, that ship's gone. There is no 8-inch cruiser built that's going to survive being hit by all 8 15-inch shells. It might still be afloat, but it's going to be on fire, it's going to be bleeding and burning in multiple spots, it's going to have massive holes wrenched in its armour. Yeah. Dan, nice young Swedish ladies might get them for you. Okay. Dan, be nice. And stop dropping sunglasses. Mole's Revenge. Question 1936. Treaty ends. If the money was no object, how many capital ships could each major power lay down at once? If money was no object, then the Royal Navy and the US Navy could lay down probably 4 each quite happily at any time, and probably be laying down 4 a year without any trouble. Without any trouble. Germany's not going to be starting that soon. They're going to be starting about 1937, as it was historically, because they need to work up their yards, and they're doing as much as they can with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. The French are also going to be a bit slow getting started. The Italians are going to have an interesting time, but they can probably increase the Littorios to 2 at once by the time you get to about 1939-ish. 2 to 300 construction once. At various stages in that program. The Japanese, well, they max out their resources anyway in 1937 to build the Yamato and Musashi. That's what basically takes over all their resources, building those two. So the thing is, the real benefits are going to be the British and the Americans, because the British will, if they do it in 1946, they'll have 4 entering service in 1938. They'll have another 4 entering service in 1939. They'll have another 4 entering service in 1940. And so they'll have had 12 new ships very quickly. The Americans about the same, and anyone else is just going to be going, ah. Also in 1936, if the treaty ends then, it means the treaty completely broken down, which means probably no one's mucking around with 14-inch guns or anything like that. They're all going straight for the 16-inch guns. So, yeah, you have a very bad... Basically, anything like that does not end up in a good scenario for the Germans and the Italians. Any of the Axis forces, because their infrastructure... The whole problem, as I often explain, is you're fighting the British Empire's infrastructure. You're fighting America's infrastructure. And that's a sheer quantity of infrastructure and sheer volume of infrastructure beyond what you can achieve in that time. If you're able to hold off war for a few years, you might be able to get close on that, as long as they're not doing anything. But they're starting from here, you're starting from here. You grow yours by 100%, you get to here. They grow theirs by 50%, they're up here. And it becomes more and more difficult for you to make that leap, to grow it that much bigger at 100% each time. And it's... They're also going down in their percentage of returns, but they're starting from that much higher. Thomas Gluzik, going back to the question about Skoda Works, these were located in Czechoslovakia and not subject to treaty restrictions. Better question is who would be the buyers. The point I made was I did say that they could be bought from. I said it would be politics would be the issue, and that's the problem. It's the politics of it. None of the major Europe and none of the powers in terms of America, Britain, even Japan, etc., would be smiling on anyone who went to outside of their clubs to go to that. So politically, you could find yourself in big trouble if you go to someone else. And let's be honest, if you're talking about Sweden, they build their own, so they're not going there. So the only option was Spain, and as said, Spain, very unlikely Spain goes outside the club to get it, because Spain buying into the club is one of their pieces of security. It's politics, as said. Question 180. From question 180, follow-up to question 180. If Denmark Strait ends with Hood sunk but Bismarck mission killed and Jürgen crippled to deploy, she is scuttled, would Hood's catastrophic loss be seen as acceptable if the Germans lose a hipper, as Bismarck be hunted down? It will be it will be different. It will be basically a case of these two giants basically one mortally wounded and destroyed each other. It wouldn't be the clean victory which is often perceived as, which it wasn't. And also, in the nicest way, again, with the Prince of Wales there, if Bismarck is mission killed and Eugene's crippled, then Prince of Wales will probably still stay battering away, and there are cruisers and destroyers there which will come in with torpedoes. Bismarck is not getting away. If she's been mission crippled to the point to which she can't get away, that battle is not ending until she's sunk. So the battle is going to officially be one capital ship lost each side, one heavy cruiser lost on the other side, victory by points to the British. Yes, it's going to be devastating losing Hood, but yeah. And that's the scenario you get in that scenario. It's only because Hood is lost the way she is. Prince of Wales has the issues she does have, and Bismarck hasn't been sufficiently damaged, and the British don't realise she's as damaged as she actually is after that fight, that what happens. Because there is an argument that Prince of Wales, if her guns hadn't been mucking around and had actually been working, she could have stayed in that fight and finished off Bismarck. She could have done. Because let's be honest, the King George V's are very well built ships. And Bismarck, as good as she is, she's already damaged. She's already got problems with her engines, etc., because of the hits Prince of Wales already done. So, cumulatively, a couple more hits could have done some really serious damage to Bismarck. Thomas goes like, politics of the arms trade. Yeah, exactly, and that's what I said. That's the point I was making earlier. As good as the Skoda Works are, and the Skoda Works are some of the best arms manufacturers in the world, the politics was not in their favour. Oh, we're almost at the end. Goodness gracious me, Runon.
Yep.
Would I be right? Would I be right? The SS Europa based 44,000 to 56,500 ton 1942 I-class aircraft carrier was a leap way too far for the Germans. It's certainly a dream. I'm not sure if it's a realistic one, but it's, let's put it this way. At that point, they are trying to push things forward. They're trying to get things into service, and they are grasping at straws. When, frankly, you don't have the cooperation between the Luftwaffe and the Ministry of Hermann Göring, the organizer, the 5-year plan, and the Navy and the sort of the rest of the forces to make that implement that sort of thing. Question Q170. Would the Royal Navy have been better served by, instead of getting 190 skewer and 136 rocks, as they did with World War II getting 326 skewer? Yes. They would have been far better served by getting more skewers. Skewers are a very good dive bomber for the 1939. Gorbian, hello, Gorbian. I'm not sure. I don't think I have no question from you today, so it's a nice home question. If I recall correctly, you've mentioned before that in a timeline where the naval race is one of the fast battleships, not slow battleships, and battle cruisers, we might have seen a type large cruiser for overseas duty. If that had occurred, what do you think their displacement gun size would have gotten around to before the timeline's naval treaty? I think you'd be looking at either between somewhere in the 9.2-inch, 12-inch gun range, and I think you'd be looking at around the 15 to 18,000 ton mark by about 1920. That's my instinct. Hank, if World War I took place in 1924 onwards, what size of fleet do you predict for the Royal Navy, Kriegsmarine, and USN? If World War I took place in 1924 onwards, they're going to be massive. The Royal Navy is going to be absolutely colossal. And when I say absolutely colossal, I mean absolutely colossal. The Kriegsmarines, or the Kaiserlich Marine as it was actually then, is not going to be as different because the Royal Navy's got into the building 8 point, and if they're still having to do a naval race, they are going to keep keeping roughly 8 to 12 capital ships under construction. The main thing is the Royal Navy are going to have phased out all their original 12-inch gun dreadnoughts long before 1924, and they might have they probably will have even phased out the 13.5-inch ships by that point as well. Possibly. They will definitely be in reserve. Whilst the Germans, I doubt, will have phased out their original generations of dreadnoughts, they will still have 11-inch ships around. That's the main thing. The Royal Navy will be on the 16.5-inch ships, maybe even 18-inch ships. The US Navy will be probably on to 18-inch ships because the Royal Navy's got their, the USN will have got their, the IGN will have grown as well. It's just going to be a order of magnitude greater. And the sheer amount of firepower that would turn up at any battle of Jutland Sullivan. I think also you'd see aircraft carriers in service by 1924. I honestly think the Royal Navy are pushing through the earliest variants of what design program, which ends up with Hermes, already prior to World War One. I wouldn't be surprised if you see aircraft carriers being built and aircraft carriers in service, and you'd have a very different system going on by the time 1924. So, does anyone know how many questions we answered today?
Yes.
How many?
And I mean that in a volume of yes. Actually, there might be a way you can look at StreamerBot if you go and you pull up your action queues and action history. It might actually give you a raw number, but I can't prove that one way or another. I know it logs it on my instance of it, but it's not logging what's in here because I'm not signed into here. While Dr. Clarke attempts to see if that is a collectible number, just as a heads up for chat, I'm going to try and make some quality of life improvements for Dr. Clarke's sake, a couple of shinies just for chat shake, so some spit and polish improvements for the Discord end of it. The one thing that may impact is I'm going to experiment with trying to get a cooldown system set up for like 30 odd seconds or so, kind of like how we had it in the YouTube chat when that functionality was working. Just so we can slightly space out between different questioners. We'll see if that works, because I know there's several people in chat that tend to post two-parter questions. There may be a way that we can broker a middle ground. Maybe not. I'll look into it. But otherwise, this is pretty much how it's going to work. I'm going to try and expand the list of key phrases so that you could maybe next week put in !Q and then type out your question to save you a couple of keystrokes. But otherwise, you can, as long as the system holds up, you can expect it to work like this, at least on YouTube for the.
Okay. Bruno?
Yes?
Sorry, you suddenly stopped talking.
No, I was. Yeah, sorry, I was done. I've got nothing more to say in the open. A couple things I just want to bring up with you before you bolt off for the evening after you close out live. But otherwise, that's what I know. And Knights is pointing out, rightly so, that we should probably put up a community post explaining that. I can type that up. Essentially, I'm just going to take my response comment to Knights from a couple of weeks ago and update it with the most recent set of information, and then you can post that at your leisure, because I do not have access to those tools on the YouTube.
It's roughly it's claiming it's got a completed count of 446. I don't think it was that many questions, but I think it was that many lines.
Yeah, that would make sense. So if you go and you divide that
roughly by about average question length is roughly about 3 lines.
What'd you say, 446?
Yeah, I'm going for roughly about 140 something questions.
Yeah, I get 148 and 2/3, so let's say $1.25, give or take.
Yep.
Which feels about right.
Yep. Thank you very much. Roughly count of 120 questions. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone, for your support. Thank you, Runon. Please, everyone, give a chat round of applause to Runon for the efforts they've put in. Seriously, this was massive. And this is to try and make all our lives easier and better in the future by having these records of these questions on the Discord. And so people can go and check them and go and read through them. And they should be there for quite a while afterwards.
Yep. And one thing for those of you that do have access to the Discord server, like I said, it's more towards the beginning of the stream, I am hoping to get a timestamp system implemented for when the question is answered.
Mm-hmm.
But that is some time down the road because I have to figure out how to
log it.
Yeah, rejigger it. Because I've essentially, as I was remarking to another community member earlier in the stream, I am a monkey just with a code language erector set banging pieces together until I get something to work like we have it now. So the system's going to need an overhaul. But this way,
yeah,
if you do want to go back, you can just click on a link and it'll take you right back to the timestamp when the question was answered.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for being here. Cascading, what's the naval technology or naval concept you wish took off but didn't? Honestly, I always liked the hydrofoils as these very fast patrol ships. They're not. There's no particularly good reason to keep them in service, but I just like them because they're cool. Okay, that's the little boy in me going, yeah, but they go fast and they're cool to look at. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you again for your support. Seriously, none of this would have been possible without you. Certainly not all the research I've been managing to do while still moving around and sorting my life out in the last year or so. And thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Have a good night. Hope you enjoyed. And I will see you again next week. And there will be a premiere again on Thursday. It's going to be a good one. But there will also be this week some more Twitch streams, if you want to see them, of me practicing Hoi 4, because that's hard to find 4. Because apparently we have got a game coming up and I'm supposed to be good at it by the time we have a game. Because, don't know if you noticed it, but the person who's going to be hosting and organising the game is a guy called Gareth the Brit, or as I call him, Gareth, who joins us on these trips and is a wonderful person. But he's pretty much a professional gamer when it comes to playing games. Yes, he doesn't do it for a living. He has an actual real job where he does a very, very good job and a very hard job. But he's pretty much a professional gamer. He's the person who literally posts tutorial videos to YouTube about how to play games. And I don't want to, A, embarrass myself playing in the same game as him, and B, on a game I'm not used to, and B, I would like to have a chance to actually score some points off him without him coaching me in the game. So I need to be better. And I'm currently trying, the current challenge I work on is, can I make Japan go democratic? Which apparently I'm told is almost impossible. Virtually impossible is to make it go communist, but I'm trying to make it go democratic. Next down. I'm not being crazy. I'm just trying to go for a democratic Japan. So far, I've failed every single time. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and thank you everyone for being here. Raptor, Stafford, Timu, Locker, Petchin, Paul Amos, Runon, of course, who's been chatting away in the chat as well as on here. Knight6831, RG, Into Morrison, Timu Locker, and thank you again, Timu, for coming and helping us out in Finland and helping us out in Estonia. It was really kind of you. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Dan. It was wonderful to have you going to be going around Scandinavia with you, as it was wonderful to go around Australia and Canada with you. And I look forward to doing Japan again next year. I would just like you to stop dropping sunglasses in random places. Please, because there are only so many times I can ask. We can ask, and you can go racing back in a place before it starts to become a habit you're doing for good luck. And then that becomes embarrassing. It's a case of, oh yeah, he always drops his sunglasses because it's the thing he does. No, we don't want to. You've done it now twice. 3 times would be too much. Okay? Just saying that. And that's coming from a loving place. That is from a loving place. DG40, good night. Thank you for being here. And everyone else, Cascadian, thank you for being here. Thomas, thank you for being here. Drakenred, thank you. Everyone who, Blackburn Maximus, thank you. Everyone who's been here, everyone who's been chatting about Germanch, hello, thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone who's been here and everyone who's been chatting about and hang out. And there is a name which I am trying to figure out how to pronounce at 10:26, and I'm just going to say thank you for being here, because my reading of Cyrillic is not at its best tonight. I was actually reading some Cyrillic earlier, on Friday morning, so the fact that I am tonight going, my brain's not processing that, is really kind of embarrassing, but that's life. And thank you everyone else. Thank you Colin Cameron, thank you Steve, thank you Leslie, thank you everyone who's been here. Take care, and have a nice evening. Thank you, take care, bye. Wrong one. Right one.